The story begins with a lady known as the Stalker, whose obsession reached such heights that she joined the Crown Prince's army just to follow and pursue him daily. Her actions did not stop there. She went as far as sneaking into his bedroom at night, leading to her repeated arrest, and thus her behavior grew more extreme over time. Ultimately, the Crown Prince's patience with her constant pursuit ran out, and her end came at his hands, as he took it upon himself to kill her. A girl in the modern era was following the events of this story, and commented that such an end was the natural and logical consequence of that lady's actions. While she was deep in her thoughts, the unexpected happened. A sudden explosion erupted around her. She then woke up to the voice of a maid trying to rouse her, while her vision was blurred, and she could only distinguish the maid's figure and her strange clothes, making her wonder in confusion about what she was seeing. The maid was supporting her with great concern, asking if she was all right, as the girl looked in a difficult and painful state while clutching her head. The maid tried to remind her of what happened, explaining that the oven had exploded, while the girl checked her face, which showed some minor scratches and wounds from the accident. She looked around at the luxurious and unfamiliar place and wondered in her mind where she was, in a state of total loss. Then she realized the shocking truth. She had managed to enter the world of the novel she was reading and was reincarnated as the Villainess, Miss Saraphi de Brinius. While the maids were bathing her, she felt despair overwhelm her as she thought about her new fate, for she knew that this character whose body she now inhabited was destined to die in the prime of her youth. One of the maids noticed her lack of clothing and wondered what could be done about it, while Saraphi sat on her bed wearing a simple nightgown. The maid told her that the reason for this was her constant preoccupation with stalking the Crown Prince to the point that she didn't even have time to change her clothes, which amazed the new Saraphi. For this reason, the maid enthusiastically announced that she had carefully selected a group of new dresses for her, but Saraphi expressed her annoyance and tried to stop her. The maid proudly displayed dresses of a provocative nature, asserting that this was the style her mistress usually preferred. She then asked her to choose the most beautiful among them, but Saraphi turned her face away in clear dissatisfaction with those options. The maid was surprised by her reaction and reminded her that she had previously refused to wear anything else, and that her current clothes were unfit to wear. Saraphi decided to get rid of that character's past, so she told the maid from behind a curtain to throw all those dresses away, announcing that she would change her clothes. The maid stood bewildered, looking at the dresses in astonishment, unable to grasp this sudden shift in her mistress's taste and her strange command. Soon her confusion vanished to be replaced by a broad smile full of joy and relief, as she realized that her young mistress had finally regained her senses. While she was immersed in her happiness, Saraphi poked her head from behind the curtain again to tell her that there was something else she wanted her to prepare, which piqued the maid's curiosity once more. Meanwhile, the soldiers in the hall were circulating news of the accident, as it seemed that Miss Saraphi was the one who caused the oven explosion, leading to the destruction of all the meals that had been prepared. They wondered among themselves with concern if they would be deprived of their meals today, expecting this incident to be just a new episode in the series of her reckless actions related to stalking. Their conversation was interrupted by Saraphi's sudden appearance, as she walked past them with confident strides wearing an elegant military uniform, which caused them such shock and extreme astonishment that one of them wondered in daze at what he was seeing. She did not care about their stunned looks and went on her way, leaving them in their confusion, for her destination was a large building that appeared to be of an official nature. She stood before the office of the Crown Prince, and here she recalled the details of the original story, how Saraphi pursued Crown Prince Raven persistently, and how her inevitable fate was to be killed by his hand at the age of 18. This dark fate prompted her to ask her maid, Emily, about her current age, which surprised the maid, who thought her mistress might have lost her memory from extreme happiness or due to the shock of the accident. Emily reminded her of her overwhelming happiness when she reached the age of 15, assuring her that this was her actual age now. Saraphi realized that the remaining time before she faced her fate was only 3 years, and with eyes full of determination, she resolved that she must change her destiny before it was too late. In the Crown Prince's office, a soldier was presenting a report regarding Miss Saraphi, explaining that she had collapsed after the oven exploded while she was trying to cook. The Crown Prince expressed his surprise at the news of the oven explosion and asked about the safety of others, to which the soldier replied that the young lady was the only one injured. The Crown Prince felt relieved that there were no other injuries and returned to his papers coldly, unconcerned about Saraphi's condition. Confusion was evident on his deputy, who did not comprehend the Crown Prince's calm reaction. The Crown Prince noticed his deputy's bewilderment and alerted him to the necessity of getting used to such matters, in reference to the Destian army. Then the Crown Prince asked his deputy if he had met Miss Saraphi before, and he replied in the negative. At that point, the Crown Prince advised him that it was better for him never to meet her, strictly warned him against getting involved with her, and ordered him to avoid her if he saw her. The deputy showed his understanding, remaining silent and obedient. The Crown Prince continued his warning, explaining to him that he would inevitably recognize her even from a distance, because of the strange and annoying aura that emanates from her entire being. He recalled with disgust and chills her previous situations, when she used to force him to eat a cinnamon cake she prepared for him without cinnamon. The Crown Prince expressed his extreme annoyance, asserting that the mere presence of that woman in his field of vision was exhausting, and redirected his deputy to avoid her as much as possible. Ironically, as soon as he finished speaking, Saraphi's voice rang out from behind the door, asking for permission to enter, making the Crown Prince feel his deputy's bad luck. Despite his resentment, the Crown Prince permitted her to enter, so Saraphi opened the door and stepped into the office with calm steps. The Crown Prince looked at his deputy with a sarcastic gaze and asked him if he was ready to face the monster. And the deputy replied with determination that as a vice commander, he would overcome any ordeal. The Crown Prince smiled with satisfaction at his deputy's steadfastness, then offered to introduce him to her. While the deputy was preparing himself, the Crown Prince continued his sarcastic introduction, describing Saraphi as the most terrifying monster in this world. Saraphi stood before them in full elegance in her military uniform and gave the salute to the Crown Prince with all calmness and respect. The features of both the Crown Prince and his deputy froze in total shock, for her appearance and polite behavior were the complete opposite of the image the Crown Prince had painted in his mind moments ago. Saraphi continued her speech with a gentle smile, explaining that she had come to escort him to the dining hall. The Crown Prince wondered in total daze what was happening, so she simply told him that dinner was ready. The Crown Prince's army, Demian, suffered from a fundamental problem: its lack of skilled chefs. For all its soldiers specialized only in combat, and every time they tried to prepare meals, the result was catastrophic. The cooking chaos was immense. One of them would cut the cutting board itself instead of the vegetables, and another would break eggs on his comrade's head. It even reached the point where one of them used a flamethrower instead of a gas stove to light the fire. The inevitable result of these attempts was a plate of distorted and burnt food that no living being could eat. Going back in time a little to the kitchen, the maid Emily was watching her mistress Saraphi as she skillfully cut carrots, expressing her surprise at her cooking prowess. Saraphi thought to herself that since the soldiers were selective about their food, blowing up the kitchen and fleeing would have landed her in big trouble. Fortunately for her, her hobby and special skill was cooking, and after tasting what she had prepared, a smile of satisfaction appeared on her face, for the food was delicious. She hoped that through this food she could improve their bad impression of her and perhaps gain some of the Crown Prince's approval. But in the dining hall, while Saraphi was presenting him with a bowl of delicious soup, the Crown Prince looked at the food with a suspicious eye, believing that her devious methods had evolved again and that this was just a new trap from her. The Crown Prince flew into a rage, looking at her with disdain, believing that she was still at her previous foolishness and that she was trying to force him to eat her vulgar food again. His word, again, confused Saraphi, who did not understand his meaning. While he sat before the wasted food, he asked her in a threatening tone what she was planning this time, accusing her of plotting a new scheme. In a sudden act, Saraphi picked up a piece of the food that had fallen on the table and ate it herself, which completely stunned the Crown Prince and his deputy. She told him calmly that she did not know of any misunderstanding he was talking about, asserting that this was just ordinary food prepared with fresh ingredients. She then added that it was fine if he refused to eat it, but she begged him not to throw it away, which seemed to confuse the Crown Prince slightly. The Crown Prince rose from his seat, suspicion still filling his eyes, stating that he saw she was plotting something once again. Then he turned to leave, challenging her to try and deceive him if she could, but he asserted that he would not fall into her trap. Saraphi remained standing in her place while the vice commander watched the situation in silence. Driven by curiosity or perhaps by duty, the vice commander took a piece of the food to taste it for himself. Later, while returning in the carriage, her maid Emily told her they had arrived at the palace. As soon as Saraphi stepped out of the carriage, she was dazzled by the magnificence and grandness of the palace she stood before. She climbed the stairs while contemplating the greatness of the building, which was worthy of the status of the most powerful family in the empire. When she entered her room, she found it excessively luxurious and flashy, making her wonder if this was truly her room. While her maid went to prepare the bath, she sat on the edge of the bed feeling some annoyance and discomfort in this lavish place. Her feet hit something under the bed, so she leaned down to discover what it was. She guessed it might be a jewelry box. She pulled out the wooden box and opened it, but expressions of confusion were drawn on her face as soon as she saw its strange contents. Emily returned to tell her that her bath was ready, finding her mistress sitting on the floor next to the open box. The maid asked her with concern what had happened. Saraphi looked at the contents of the box, which were a lock of pink hair, and asked Emily if she knew what this was, using the excuse that her memory was still blurred. Emily answered hesitantly that this hair belonged to a noble lady whom Saraphi hated intensely. Saraphi tried to recall the details of the novel but did not remember this part, so she guessed it might be a side event that wasn't mentioned, and wondered about the reason for the original character's hatred of that lady. Emily confirmed her suspicions, explaining that the reason was that the lady tried to seduce the crown prince, which gave Saraphi a headache as she thought about how ridiculous the situation was. Then Saraphi realized the reason for Raven's extreme shock at her polite behavior. No wonder he was expecting the worst from her. Saraphi decided that she needed to apologize to that lady one day, a decision that deeply surprised Emily. Emily surprised her with shocking news. That lady had already passed away, which made Saraphi freeze in her place and ask her to repeat what she said. She wondered in horror what happened to her, a terrifying possibility crossing her mind, that the original Saraphi was the one who killed her. Emily reassured her that it wasn't about who did it or what happened. That lady's bad reputation filled the entire kingdom, making Saraphi wonder about the existence of another character with such a terrible reputation other than herself. Emily explained that the lady was famous for her heinous deed, as she planted a stimulant in the crown prince's food and snuck into his bedroom that night, but she was caught and driven out in disgrace. The maid told her mistress that she was very angry when that incident occurred and insisted that the lady's deed was a crime, even exerting great effort to prevent Saraphi from going to kill her, while Saraphi wondered in confusion if she was the one who snuck into the bedroom and not that lady. The maid continued her speech explaining that the lady, out of malice for being rejected, committed suicide by swallowing poison directly in front of the crown prince, asserting that her level of actions was on a completely different degree of madness. Saraphi realized that there was a fundamental difference in events. The Saraphi character in the novel had stalking tendencies, but she wouldn't commit heinous acts like drugging food or committing suicide in front of the crown prince. Confusion took hold of her as she wondered what was going on and how the content of the story she knew had changed. In the crown prince's office, his deputy was telling him that Saraphi's meal that she presented yesterday had won everyone's approval, and therefore, she would be preparing the meals from now on. The crown prince looked at his papers with indifference and ordered his deputy to tell her to do as she pleased, but he corrected himself, adding a condition in exchange for his approval. In the kitchen, Saraphi was feeling optimistic, believing that the story's content might change now and that she might even be able to avoid her inevitable fate, so she resolved to do her best. She offered her maid Emily to taste the food she had prepared, and she agreed enthusiastically. Emily praised the deliciousness of the food, asserting that everyone would love it, while Saraphi hoped in secret that it would also win the crown prince's admiration. Her only wish was for the crown prince to eat from her food that day. Her dreams were interrupted by the arrival of the vice commander, who gave her a message from the crown prince stating that she had been granted permission to be in charge of the meals. But he added a shocking exception, that the crown prince would not eat anything as long as she was in the kitchen. Saraphi wondered in shock if the crown prince was planning to fast. She realized that her relationship with the crown prince had reached a dead end because of previous stalking acts, and that any attempt to apologize now would not work. She thought that if ordinary methods wouldn't move his heart, then she must do something with a strong impact to show him the extent of her desperation and her desire for change. She told the vice commander that she understood, and in that case, she would fast as well. The vice commander looked at her in total confusion, unable to understand her decision. She announced with a smile that she couldn't stand idly by and watch the crown prince suffer. Later, she was trembling with fear, realizing that she might die of hunger before the crown prince even thought about eating. Days passed, and Saraphi was following the crown prince while he trained, wondering how he could continue moving like this without food. Hunger began to affect her, and she felt a headache and dizziness, so she decided to look for a quiet place to rest. Suddenly, she lost her balance and felt as if she was going to fall. But before she fell, a strong hand caught her, and she found herself in the crown prince's arms, so she thanked him with a stammer. She looked at him in a state of shock, wondering how he appeared suddenly, as he was in another place a second ago. The crown prince asked her sharply what she was doing in this restricted area. She apologized to him, explaining that she felt a headache and dizziness. The crown prince looked at her with disdain and called her a fool, then grabbed her shoulder, warning her not to misunderstand the situation. He told her coldly that regardless of what she did, he would never open his heart to her. Then he whispered a single harsh word in her ear, calling her a killer. Shock was evident on Saraphi as she wondered to herself if she was truly a killer, realizing that there was something she was ignorant of regarding this character's past. The Crown Prince continued his hostile speech, denouncing her new tone and unfamiliar clothes, while she was in confusion about the meaning of the word killer that he said. The Crown Prince accused her of pretending to be calm, but she decided within herself to maintain her composure, to focus on the current situation and postpone researching the matters she was ignorant of until later. He demanded angrily that she stop this ridiculous acting and return to acting naturally as he knew her. With complete calmness, she offered him an apology for everything that happened in the past. Her apology stunned the Crown Prince, as he did not expect that reaction from her. Then she made him a promise that she would not pursue His Highness anymore. He looked at her with sarcasm and doubt, wondering how he was supposed to believe her. So she pointed out that she hadn't been near him during the past few days and assured him that this situation would continue, asking him not to worry. Accordingly, she suggested that he eat a meal now, but she realized that her attempt might not work. So she explained to him that fasting is used as a means of protest because of food's direct link to health, and she warned him that he might feel fine now, but he would soon get sick if he continued in this way. At that moment, extreme weakness overcame her, and she began to stagger while whispering a request for some food, only for the Crown Prince to rush to catch her and prevent her from falling. And after that incident, she succeeded in convincing the Crown Prince to eat. And while he was eating, signs of surprise appeared on his face from the taste he did not expect. The Crown Prince commented that it seemed the food was not bad to the point where it was impossible to eat, so Saraphi thanked him with gratitude. Later in her room, the word killer returned to occupy her thoughts, and she wondered seriously if she had actually killed someone. Anxiety prompted her to ask her maid Emily if she had committed some crime. She clarified her question more, wondering if she had killed someone, for example. Emily burst out laughing, asserting that this was impossible, and that her mistress was not the type who would do something like that. Saraphi was surprised by her quick and definitive denial, so Emily offered to explain the matter since she didn't remember. Emily reminded her that despite her hatred of insects, she always felt bad about killing them and ordered her every time to release them instead of harming them. She added that the task of catching insects and releasing them was more difficult than just killing them, and Saraphi seemed to understand, and she apologized to Emily for previous troubles, saying that she could do as she pleased from now on, but Emily explained that this was not what she meant. Emily concluded her speech with an absolute confirmation that her mistress could never be a bad person who would harm any being. Saraphi thanked her maid for her words, who replied that she did nothing worthy of thanks. After that, the maid decided to go prepare the ingredients, while Saraphi wanted to wander around, so she wore a hooded robe and went out. On her tour, she witnessed a situation where a noble man was bullying a child from the common people, telling him that he was just one of the common people and did not need a doll. The nobleman continued his mockery, saying that the fate of the common people from birth until death is to be just worker ants. The child begged the man to return his toy, but the nobleman mocked it, describing it as a piece of worn-out cloth, and threatened to set it on fire. Saraphi interrupted the scene with a firm command, asking the man to stop, which drew his attention to her. Wondering about her identity, she suggested to him calmly that he return the toy to the child, but he met her request with a forced smile and asked her if the child really needed that toy, then threw it on the ground with contempt and ordered the child to pick it up. And her insolence aroused the anger of the nobleman, who wondered about her identity to act in this arrogant manner. But as soon as she removed her hood, the nobleman's features changed to astonishment, for he recognized her silver hair and purple eyes. He recognized her immediately, wondering in shock if she was Duchess Brinius. Saraphi ordered him in a tone that accepted no argument to apologize to the child and return his toy immediately. Her order aroused his resentment, and he wondered in anger how she could order him to do such a thing when he was a noble like her. She replied with a rhetorical question as to whether his family hadn't taught him that nobles cannot bully others without reason. He felt deeply insulted and realized that this insolent girl had made him look disgraceful, so he turned to leave. As he was leaving, he threw the toy toward the child with resentment and warned him to consider himself lucky and to be more careful in the future. Saraphi stopped him again and told him that if he had any objection to the child, he could visit Brinius' palace at any time, which made him quicken his steps and flee. Saraphi turned to the child and reassured him, telling him that if he was bullied again, he could visit her at any time, and the child agreed happily. The Crown Prince and his deputy were watching the situation from afar. Saraphi saw them and noticed that they seemed in a hurry. While she wanted to ask them if the food was delicious, she approached them and asked the vice commander, Demian, if something had happened. Demian told her that it seemed a different race in the north was causing trouble recently, and that he would be heading there within a few days to exterminate them. Saraphi expressed her concern that the mission was in a few days, considering this a bad thing, but Demian reassured her that it wasn't a big deal, and that this had happened repeatedly before, and all they had to do was intervene to solve the problem. She offered to prepare large quantities of jerky for them that wouldn't spoil if they were going to battle, so Demian understood she was worried about his food. At that moment, an older man named Uncle Bart appeared and asked Saraphi if she was going with them as well. Bart explained to her that the mission would be difficult because it was in a wild forest, but Saraphi wondered who would prepare the food if she didn't go. Bart laughed and said that her going with them would be a great help to them. Saraphi asked him about the duration they planned to stay, as they would need to prepare the ingredients in advance. He replied that His Highness was coming too, so he didn't think it would take long. Then asked the Crown Prince directly about how long the trip would take. The Crown Prince appeared suddenly and replied that it would take about a week. Saraphi was surprised by his sudden presence, while Bart welcomed the Crown Prince's joining, considering that it would speed up the end of the mission. Bart asked Saraphi if she heard the duration, and she replied in the affirmative. Then he asked her what she was preparing, and she told him that she intended to prepare jerky, but she heard from one of the shops that there was a magic spell to prevent food from spoiling, and that she would need to learn some magic. Bart told her that there are ingredients sold that already have magic on them, but they are expensive, which frustrated her. Saraphi was thinking that this was the first time she had gone into battle, and she never imagined that she would encounter that thing, which made her feel despair and repeat that this couldn't happen. As they were walking in the forest, Saraphi was panting from fatigue and wondering to herself how this couldn't happen while it was actually happening. She looked at the soldiers who were walking with ease and wondered how everyone could be perfectly fine in this situation. Astonishment took hold of her as she wondered if these people were truly human with their ability to bear this trouble. She turned to Demian and asked him hesitantly if they could move directly to their destination, reminding him that they had already moved to the forest entrance. Demian explained to her that large-scale teleportation is difficult in a forest where magical energy is mixed and unstable. Saraphi understood the matter, so Demian offered to arrange for her to leave the forest and inform the Crown Prince if the matter was beyond her capacity, but she refused and asserted that she would be fine. Demian noticed that she was straining herself heavily, so he told the Crown Prince about it, and he wondered if it was good to leave her like this while she was struggling to follow. The Crown Prince denounced Demian's sudden and excessive interest in a specific individual. Demian apologized immediately. The Crown Prince ordered him to stop worrying about her and focus only on the march. From a distance, the Crown Prince watched Saraphi as she sat to rest for a moment before she rose and continued her way. Saraphi was encouraging herself not to rely on others, reminding herself that she was no longer the old Saraphi who did as she pleased, and that she was now a mature and responsible person. She resolved that she could do it too. Suddenly, her foot tripped on something, and she looked to find a strange vine that had wrapped around her leg. She had hardly grasped what was happening before she felt a sharp pain in her shoulder. The vine grabbed her leg and began pulling her away from the path. She screamed for help as she fell and was swept away from the group. She fell on the ground in an unknown place inside the forest, panting with fear and fatigue, wondering where she was. A small child with pointed ears appeared before her, so she asked him about his identity. The child noticed that she was different from other humans, and he explained to her that it was strange, for he could hear the thoughts of ordinary humans, but he could hear nothing from her. Saraphi wondered in shock if he could read thoughts, and he confirmed that to her. In the camp, the soldiers were wondering if they would camp here tonight, and one of them answered that the scout party had not returned yet. The Crown Prince noticed Saraphi's absence and wondered where she went. Demian asked the Crown Prince about his destination, so he told him not to tell others and that he would go search for Saraphi himself. Meanwhile, Saraphi asked the child about her location and the reason he brought her here, and he answered that he knew the reason for the humans coming. He asked her directly if their goal was to kill them. Saraphi was shocked and realized that this child belonged to the heterogeneous race that was kidnapping people. The elf child angrily denied her accusation, asserting that they as elves do not do such things. The child realized that there seemed to be a serious misunderstanding, so Saraphi reassured him that there was no problem then, because the Crown Prince would never harm innocent people. The child questioned her words, pointing out that he could sense the presence of a large number of human weapons near them. Saraphi explained to him that they came here because they heard about the existence of heterogeneous beings harming people in this area. The child understood the matter, and since the elves do not attack humans, he concluded that Saraphi would not harm him, so she reassured him that she certainly wouldn't and asked him not to worry. The child told her she couldn't lie, which aroused her confusion. He explained to her that even if he couldn't hear her thoughts, he could distinguish her feelings and sense. Saraphi wondered to herself about the meaning of the word sense. The child answered that humans who lie emit the scent of lying, so Saraphi wondered if this was an animal instinct. Suddenly, the child felt something and asked her to hide. Two strange creatures with horns appeared, and one of them said she smelled human. The elf child came out to face them and ordered them to get out of here because this was not their area. The two creatures mocked him and described him as weak and incomplete. The female among them spotted Saraphi hiding behind the child and said she found her. Saraphi realized that these were the real heterogeneous race. She told the child that the situation was dangerous and they must flee. Then she embraced him, trying to protect him. But one of the creatures attacked them with its weapon. At the last moment, the Crown Prince appeared and repelled the attack, reproaching Saraphi for her recklessness again. The Crown Prince looked at the creatures that attacked them, and with one stroke of the sword, he finished them all. Saraphi looked at him in shock, so the Crown Prince asked her why she was here, and also wondered about the identity of those creatures. The Crown Prince pointed his sword toward the elf child and asked if he was the one who brought Saraphi here. Saraphi intervened quickly, explaining that the vines were pulling her and that this child was the one who saved her. The child whispered to Saraphi that he didn't like that man because his mind was too loud, so she reassured him, laughing that he was a good person. Annoyance was evident on the Crown Prince as he watched their interaction. The Crown Prince decided that it was time to return to the army. Suddenly, Saraphi felt a pain in her shoulder, so the Crown Prince asked her with concern if she was injured. He noticed that her shoulder was swollen and asked her what happened. Saraphi tried to downplay the injury, but she remembered what the Crown Prince had done to her, realizing that he was the one who did it. So he asked if those creatures were the cause of her injury, but she told the Crown Prince that the injury was not from them, that she was perfectly fine, and that the Crown Prince had saved her before they attacked her. The Crown Prince grabbed the elf child by his clothes, wondering if he was the one who harmed Saraphi. Saraphi denied that immediately and asked him to put down the child, who in turn was shouting, demanding the Crown Prince leave him, and introducing himself by the name Zephyr. The Crown Prince lifted Zephyr aside and demanded Saraphi tell him the truth about who caused her injury. Saraphi claimed she injured herself while exercising, but the Crown Prince did not believe her, pointing out that he had never seen her exercise. And he reminded her that despite her constant lectures to him about maintaining health, he could not count the number of times he saw her taking a nap immediately after finishing eating, which amazed her, wondering when he saw her do that. Saraphi was in confusion. She wanted to be honest, but she didn't want to make things awkward either. The Crown Prince warned her that his patience was not long and ordered her to tell him the truth immediately. Under the influence of his words, which seemed like a spell, Saraphi admitted that the Crown Prince himself was the one who harmed her when he grabbed her shoulder and pushed her toward the wall. Saraphi realized that he used dragon speech to force her to tell the truth, and considered that unfair. The Crown Prince felt shock and regret for what he did, but he promised her that he would make sure she received proper treatment when they returned to the palace, asserting that a shoulder injury is not something to be taken lightly. Saraphi tried to reassure him that she was fine, and that the wound would heal quickly if a doctor or priest examined it. The Crown Prince agreed reluctantly, but asked her to tell him immediately if the pain increased. Saraphi thanked him for his concern. Their conversation was interrupted by Zephyr, who was still being held by the Crown Prince, asking him to put him down. The Crown Prince put him down on the ground sharply. Zephyr ran toward Saraphi and hugged her, which aroused the jealousy of the Crown Prince, who seemed very disgruntled with this child. Zephyr whispered to Saraphi that elves have healing abilities. Zephyr told Saraphi that her shoulder looked painful and offered to treat it for her, but the Crown Prince intervened quickly and pushed Zephyr's hand away from Saraphi, ordering him not to touch her. Zephyr shouted at the Crown Prince, explaining that he was only trying to treat the place that was injured because of the Crown Prince himself, and that if he truly felt bad, he shouldn't intervene. Zephyr told Saraphi that the treatment might tickle a little, and asked her to endure it. Zephyr placed his hand on Saraphi's shoulder and began using his healing magic, but he was surprised that his magic did not work, even though he was sure it reached her. Saraphi reassured him that she was the type on whom magic does not work easily, but she wondered to herself why it didn't work, for she remembered from the novel that elven magic is very effective in treatment. The Crown Prince interrupted the situation, asking Saraphi to leave the child alone because they would return soon. Zephyr refused to let them leave. Saraphi asked him the reason, and Zephyr replied that there was something they both should know. Zephyr revealed his true identity, announcing that he was the leader of the humanoids in this forest. Zephyr's announcement that he was the leader of the humanoids caused shock for both Saraphi and the Crown Prince. Zephyr explained that he had not completed his coming-of-age ceremony yet, and therefore no one listens to what he says. He continued that the reason for the humanoids' rampage now, and the reason for the humans coming to this forest, is all because of this problem, the problem of the non-completion of his coming-of-age ceremony. Zephyr begged Saraphi to help him complete his coming-of-age ceremony, asserting that if she did so, then this forest and the people as well, none of them would have to be hurt anymore. But the Crown Prince refused. He explained that as an unwritten rule, they do not interfere in the affairs of other races and do not encroach upon their lands. But Saraphi ignored him and asked Zephyr how he completes the ceremony. Zephyr replied that to become an adult, he needs recognition from the elven god. But the god does not recognize him. Saraphi wondered about the reason. Zephyr answered sadly that he believes the reason is that he is an incomplete elf, and he revealed that he is half elf and half of another race, and that people call him a hybrid. But he added that there is one way to solve this problem, which is that if he gets married, the god might finally recognize him as an adult. The idea amazed Saraphi, and with all innocence, Zephyr asked Saraphi to marry him. The Crown Prince stood frozen in his place from the horror of the shock. Zephyr explained that if he does not become an adult, this forest will remain dangerous forever, and everyone will continue to get hurt because of him. Saraphi seemed as if she empathized with him, but the Crown Prince intervened firmly, announcing that he would not allow that. Saraphi tried to convince him, saying that the matter is unfortunate and that Zephyr is very pure and kind. The Crown Prince asked her angrily if she really planned to marry him just because she felt sorry for him. He added that besides that, he is a person she just met, and he is a child too. Saraphi hugged Zephyr while saying he is a poor thing. The Crown Prince tried to convince her that believing him just because he looks poor is not a good idea. Then he grabbed Zephyr and asked him his age, and he threatened him that he would force him to answer. Zephyr replied calmly that his age is 227 years, which shocked Saraphi. Zephyr tried to defend himself, explaining that the average age of elves is thousands of years, and that the standard is different from humans, and that he is still a small child, asking them not to misunderstand the matter. Then he turned to Saraphi, pleading with her not to hate him because he didn't mean to deceive her. But the Crown Prince pushed him to the ground. The Crown Prince asked Saraphi sarcastically if she still wanted to marry this 227-year-old old man. His description ignited Zephyr's anger, who shouted, demanding that he not call him an old man. Saraphi intervened and asked them both to calm down. Then she directed her speech to the Crown Prince, reminding him that the reason for their coming here was to subdue the rampaging humanoids. She continued, wondering if there was a way to resolve this matter peacefully instead of fighting and shedding blood. She added that in this case, they had no reason to ignore the problem, and if they could help, there was no reason not to cooperate. She suggested to the Crown Prince that they first go to meet the elven god, for perhaps they could persuade him. After a brief thought, the Crown Prince reluctantly agreed to meet this alleged god, but he warned Zephyr that if he brought up a ridiculous topic like marriage again, he would destroy this forest immediately, telling him to be prepared. Meanwhile, Zephyr was observing how the Crown Prince spoke with Saraphi, commenting that the Crown Prince was an unpleasant person and that he had twisted feelings toward Saraphi. Zephyr wished the Crown Prince were more honest with his feelings. Zephyr led them through the forest. They finally arrived at the elven village, which was a beautiful and dazzling place. But Saraphi noticed that everyone was hiding from them. She wondered if it was because they were not used to humans. The Crown Prince explained to her that they were afraid of humans. Saraphi asked him why. The Crown Prince told her that a long time ago, humans had committed a massacre against the humanoids. In the beginning, it was a legitimate fight against aggressive humanoids. But over time, the situation changed. The war they started to repel aggressors gradually lost its original purpose, and in the end, they began attacking indiscriminately. Before they realized it, hunting humanoids became a form of entertainment for humans. They would capture them for their unique appearances, sell them, force them to work until death, and boast of them as trophies. The Crown Prince added that this was an old story and that it was legally prohibited now. But he went on to say that wealthy nobles still buy and sell humanoids secretly in the shadows. Saraphi realized that this was why Raven in the novel despised the nobility. Saraphi approached one of the hiding elves and introduced herself calmly. Zephyr whispered to the elf that Saraphi was a kind-hearted person, and that while the Crown Prince was another matter, she was an incredibly good person. Saraphi felt somewhat embarrassed, as she preferred not to be the center of attention. They followed Zephyr inside one of the buildings and climbed a long staircase. One of the elves approached her and asked hesitantly if Saraphi was human, so she reassured her that she was, and that she wasn't scary. Children began to approach her, admiring her beautiful scent and silver hair, and one of them even wished to braid it. Saraphi asked the children if they liked cookies, but they didn't know what they were. She took out a box full of cookies for them, explaining that they were a sweet and delicious snack, and offered for them to try. The children tasted the cookies and liked them very much, expressing how sweet and delicious they were. The Crown Prince was watching the situation from a distance in surprise. Some of the adult elves noticed that Saraphi possessed a pure and clear aura and that she treated the children with kindness. More children approached her, admiring her shimmering hair. They praised the beauty and softness of her hair. She also commented on the beauty of her hair herself. The village leader stepped forward and welcomed Saraphi, asking her about her identity. Saraphi introduced herself with full respect as Saraphi de Brinius. The leader told her that her aura was truly clear and calm, and that she had a flow of energy that is difficult for humans to sense. Saraphi thanked him for his words gently. The leader asked her if she wished to meet the elven god. Saraphi confirmed her strong desire to help. The leader explained that the elven god resides in the heart of this forest, in a gap between worlds where pure energy gathers. He added that for a non-elven being, only the one who embodies primordial beauty is able to open that door. The phrase primordial beauty puzzled the crown prince, but Zephyr seemed confident that Saraphi would be fine, as she was pure, unlike a certain other person. The leader told Saraphi that they must first perform purification rituals to open the elven gate, and asked if she was mentally prepared. Saraphi agreed immediately. The leader turned to the crown prince and asked for his opinion. The crown prince replied that he did not know what these rituals involved, but he did not need them, and asked them to perform them for her alone. The leader understood and asked everyone to proceed toward the altar. Everyone stood before the altar. The leader placed his hand on a glowing blue stone, and he ordered Saraphi to close her eyes and face the darkness within her. In her inner darkness, she heard familiar voices accusing her of indifference and coldness, and that she said nothing but yes in any situation. The voices wondered if she truly loved, and how she was no different from the people outside. In fact, they didn't even believe she possessed feelings. She opened her eyes to find her tears falling, thinking that those memories had already faded. Saraphi wondered to herself why people get hurt even though she did nothing wrong, asserting that she didn't want to hurt anyone. She resolved that just because they were different from one another, it gave no one the right to hurt her. In that week, the gate opened before her with a bright light, which astonished the village leader and the others. A being resembling an elf with long white hair appeared from the gate, and the crown prince wondered if this was the elven god, noting that his aura was weaker than he imagined. Zephyr noticed that the crown prince could see the elven god even without the ritual, so he asked him about his true identity. But the crown prince asked him to remain ignorant because he would be shocked if he discovered the truth. The elven god addressed Saraphi, describing her as the human who hides primordial beauty within her, and asked what she wished to convey to him. Saraphi asked him to grant recognition to the leader who rules the various races in this forest so he could perform his role. The elven god answered her that everything has its appointed time, and that once preparations are complete, Zephyr would naturally become accepted as leader even if he didn't grant him recognition. He explained that this was an ordeal he must endure, and that this was not something someone else could do for him. Saraphi admitted that his words were true, but Zephyr interrupted, insisting that if they got married, the god would have to recognize him as an adult, and that he had brought a bride with him. Zephyr tried to persuade the god that Saraphi was very kind and had a beautiful heart, and that she always hugged him, making her an ideal candidate for a bride. And he reminded her that she was the one who told him he was cute, which embarrassed her, and she reluctantly admitted. Then he asked her to kiss him, because a kiss is necessary to complete the marriage. The crown prince grabbed Zephyr and pushed him away from her angrily, and he issued his final warning, ordering him to stay still. Saraphi interrupted the situation, addressing the elven god, pointing out that his words sounded a bit strange. The elven god asked her the reason for their strangeness. Saraphi told him that his words sounded selfish. Her words astonished the crown prince and the village leader. Saraphi confronted him, saying that he was the one who appointed him as leader, but he didn't allow him to hold his coming-of-age ceremony, and that the chaos in the forest started from this contradiction. She continued that because he cannot become an adult, he cannot become a leader, and because of that, the races that have no leader have spiraled out of control, leading to many people being hurt and blood being shed. She asked him as a god who protects nature, if he thought it was right to leave this situation as it is. The elven god answered her that one does not grow without suffering, and that the child is currently developing his vessel, and others are merely waiting for that time. The crown prince set Zephyr on the ground, announcing that he had no time to listen to this meaningless logic. Zephyr surprised everyone by saying he agreed with him. The crown prince commented that this was the first time they agreed on something. Then he turned to the elven god, challenging him and asking if he had bestowed the title of elven god upon himself, and ordered him to do as he pleased, whether testing the vessel or breaking it, but without making a fuss and in a quiet corner of the forest. Then he announced that he was the crown prince of this empire, and ordered the god not to play the role of an irresponsible spectator in his presence. And he threatened him that if he did not recognize Zephyr as leader immediately, he would overthrow him and install a new god of his own making in his place. The elven god explained that he was a being identical to nature itself and arrogantly denounced that a human would dare to oppose him, describing his action as absolute arrogance. The crown prince replied sarcastically, asking if the god claimed to be nature, then challenged him to see which of them was truly closer to it. Suddenly, a powerful black aura began to emit from the crown prince, transforming into a massive black dragon. The scene left everyone stunned. The elven god felt fear, realizing that this was something even the spirits of the earth could not endure. The crown prince threatened him that he would continue talking, but he would only listen to his lecture after he knelt on his knees. Under the immense pressure, the elven god knelt in pain and announced his agreement to hold the coming-of-age ceremony. He ordered those present to prepare the ceremony, announcing that he would bless the child, which astonished the village leader and Zephyr. After the matter was done, the god turned to leave, announcing that this should be enough. The crown prince felt exhausted after using his power, so Saraphi asked him with concern if he was all right. He angrily ordered her not to approach him. Saraphi looked at him with concern, while the crown prince was seeing overlapping images of her surrounded by a dark aura. The crown prince was in a state of rampage, shouting for her to go away, and he released a massive force toward her, yelling not to come near him. Everyone watched the scene in shock. Saraphi fell to the ground unconscious. The crown prince looked at what he had done in shock and horror. Zephyr rushed to her, trying to rouse her. Saraphi woke up to find herself in a strange place surrounded by blue roses, and saw Zephyr beside her. Zephyr assured her that it was him and asked if she was all right. She wondered what had happened, for she remembered going to get recognition from the elven god, and Zephyr told her that Raven, the crown prince, had a sudden rampage and pushed her, causing her to fall. Saraphi recalled her memory, realizing that everything that happened was his fault. She asked Zephyr if the elven god had finally recognized him. Saraphi congratulated him on that, but Zephyr seemed confused. He said stammeringly that it didn't matter. Before he left, Zephyr told her there was something she should know, and he warned her about Raven, saying he feels like he will go crazy when he is near him, and that he is like a ticking time bomb that could explode at any moment. He asked her not to forget what he just told her. Saraphi thought about his words and realized she had no other choice, and that it was a mistake to believe that years of hatred could be easily erased. She admitted that this was true, and that if her presence beside him caused him more pain, then perhaps it would be better to... While the village leader was contemplating the beauty of the stars that night, he noticed that the crown prince seemed lost in thought. The leader told him that when he sees beautiful stars, other beautiful things in their hearts often come to mind. He asked the crown prince what he thought of when he looked at the stars, and he replied that they weren't necessarily beautiful things. He explained that he thought of only one person who had been occupying his mind a lot lately, which piqued the leader's curiosity. The crown prince described this person as the worst kind of person, someone he wished to have nothing to do with. The leader wondered if he hated this person to that extent, and the crown prince confirmed that she was indeed a desperately terrible person. The crown prince recalled his memories of the old Saraphi, how she lacked morals and values, was always selfish, and justified her bad behavior, describing her as a truly desperate human being. But one day, she suddenly changed completely and began to care for the weak, which she had never done before. He saw her taking care to prepare fresh food for the soldiers tired from intensive training and asking her maid to take a rest. She worked every day, always thinking of others, and selflessly dedicated herself to them regardless of difficulties, as if she had become a completely different person. In the beginning, the crown prince believed that all this was just acting, and that she was trying to deceive him and gain his trust to trap him, and that she was plotting some scheme. He mocked her actions, believing he would never be fooled, but every time he looked at her, he felt that her smile was real. Although he knew that all this might be a lie, it still affected him deeply. At a certain moment, he began to wish that all this were real. He admitted to the leader that if she returned to her old self again, he believed he would feel even more uncomfortable than he was before he knew her in her current form. He felt relieved when she began acting like a normal human, and wondered if it was unfair that she continued to change so much. He told the leader that he could understand from this that his feelings are not of the type he imagines, and that this is the story of a broken-hearted man suffering from trauma. The leader reminded the crown prince of the phrase, "Only those who possess primordial beauty can meet the god," and the crown prince admitted it was a vague phrase. The leader asked him if he thought it was too vague, which astonished the crown prince, wondering how he knew that. The leader asked him if he had ever thought about the meaning of the word beautiful. He explained to him that beauty means one's existence being in its correct state. In other words, one being in their true and ideal form. And he told the crown prince that everything that makes him who he is will one day reach balance and harmony, and thus become complete. The leader commented that beautiful is a truly beautiful word. The crown prince realized that if beautiful meant one's true and ideal form, then the condition for meeting the god is to be naturally true to oneself. This means that Saraphi is now in her true and ideal form. The crown prince concluded that the possibility of her returning to her previous personality is zero, while the leader commented that the stars were exceptionally beautiful that night. The next day, with the help of the elven village, all members of the expeditionary force were able to return to the castle without any difficulty, except for Saraphi and Emperor Raven. Zephyr was clinging to Saraphi, refusing to let her go, while the crown prince asked her how long she would tolerate his selfishness. Saraphi promised Zephyr that she would come back to play with him again. Saraphi made a promise to Zephyr that she would come back to visit him, which she confirmed with full seriousness. Zephyr took her promise in another way and suggested with an innocent smile that they get married the next time they meet, which aroused the displeasure of the crown prince who was standing beside them. The crown prince turned and began activating a magical teleportation circle, announcing that it was time to leave, while Saraphi called him anxiously asking him to wait for her. Panic seized her as she saw him gradually disappearing within the magical light, as she thought for a moment he would leave her behind alone. But the crown prince suddenly grabbed her arm and pulled her toward him to embrace her firmly inside the teleportation circle, and asked her disapprovingly what she was doing, and if she really wanted to be left behind, criticizing her for standing still as if she had never teleported before. Saraphi answered him in confusion that she was absent-minded for a few moments, so the crown prince advised her in a serious tone not to accept everything asked of her so easily. Zephyr waved to them in goodbye enthusiastically and thanked Saraphi for everything, while the crown prince's cold gazes watched the situation. The crown prince bowed to the elven village leader in silent respect, bidding him farewell. As soon as they arrived at their destination, Saraphi lost her balance and fell to the ground because she was not used to teleportation. The crown prince looked at her with resentment and asked sarcastically how she could be so confused, and if she lost her muscle mass when her head hit, while she was thinking to herself, hoping he wouldn't delve into the matter, and she replied to him with indifference. She sat on the ground thinking about the fact that she came from a world where magic does not exist, and that this was the first time she experienced teleportation, wondering in concern if she would be able to survive in this world. The crown prince extended his hand to her and asked her how long she intended to sit like this, asking her to rise. She looked at his extended hand in shock, wondering to herself about the reason for his sudden kindness, for he usually paid her no attention. She thanked him hesitantly while holding his hand to stand, with confusion still controlling her regarding the change that had occurred in him. She remembered Zephyr's warning to her to be careful, and that the crown prince might lose control of himself, so she wondered anxiously if he was putting too much pressure on himself, and what would happen if his anger actually exploded. Her thoughts were interrupted by the voice of the crown prince, who told her that he was unable to talk to her last night because the time was late. Then he surprised her by offering a formal and explicit apology for pushing her hard earlier, leaving her in a state of daze. As she recalled Zephyr's warning that the crown prince is like a ticking time bomb, he continued his apology that he didn't mean to hurt her. So Saraphi interrupted him anxiously, asking him to stop and not to pressure himself further. She reassured him that she was fine and asked him not to worry about her, and to treat her as he usually did, which aroused his confusion as he wondered what she meant by that. She continued her request pleadingly, which increased the crown prince's confusion. She explained in her secret that she was asking him to ignore her, despise her, and insult her as he always did. And as evidence of the success of their mission, it seemed that Zephyr had successfully completed his coming-of-age ceremony. For less than a day after the team's return, the incidents caused by the humanoids stopped completely, and thus, the Destian army regained its quiet daily life once again. But this quiet did not last long, as some soldiers were surprised by Saraphi's voice pleading with one of them to insult her, which struck them with extreme shock. They poked their heads from behind one of the pillars in confusion, wondering what was happening and the identity of the person she was talking to. Vice Commander Demian stepped forward and told them that some people preparing for the festival play had lost their way, and asked them to move away to avoid any problems. It seemed the soldiers were convinced by this explanation, and one of them wondered if this was all there was to it, for he thought something serious had happened, while another commented that the idea of a play seemed a bit strange. Meanwhile, Demian was rebuking the crown prince, reminding him that he had warned him repeatedly against saying such things in public where there are many eyes watching them, while Saraphi was standing beside him, apologizing. Demian directed his speech to Saraphi, explaining that her releasing statements that might be misunderstood out loud in broad daylight is problematic, then turned to the crown prince to tell him that entering into a loud argument with a woman is completely unacceptable. So the crown prince replied that the reason was that she said something strange. Demian interrupted him angrily, announcing that this does not matter now, and that maintaining the crown prince's dignity is what maintains order in the Imperial palace and in Destian as a whole. Demian continued his stern rebuke, shouting and wondering how many times he had to repeat his words, but his shout was suddenly cut off by a sharp pain. Demian fell to the ground unconscious while spitting blood, so the crown prince and Saraphi rushed toward him with great concern, and the crown prince called him by name in panic. In a medical room, the crown prince asked the treating doctor about Demian's condition, and the doctor answered after a short thought that Demian was in a deep sleep, and it seemed he was suffering from sleep deprivation, which puzzled Saraphi. The crown prince wondered in surprise if he was just asleep, while Saraphi pointed out with concern the large amount of blood that came out of his nose and mouth. So the doctor explained that sleep deprivation in any form inevitably leads to health deterioration. The doctor advised them that by avoiding stressful situations and getting enough sleep and rest, Demian would recover quickly. The doctor added that achieving this requires cooperation from those around him, asking them for help in this matter. So the crown prince agreed reluctantly, while Saraphi replied with a nervous laugh, confirming that she would cooperate, of course. As they were walking in one of the palace corridors, Saraphi wondered with concern if Mr. Demian would be all right. So the crown prince reassured her that there was no need to worry. Saraphi was surprised by his excessive confidence, so he answered her simply that he had asked Demian himself. He explained to her that Demian had been suffering from the inability to sleep for years, but this matter hadn't caused him any health problems before. Saraphi thought that Demian was suffering from an illness she didn't know about, for he always seemed calm and composed, and she guessed his condition might be insomnia. The crown prince asserted that in any case, exposing him to more stress is not good, then asked Saraphi to make her annoying statements in a place where there is no one, which made her wonder in confusion about which statements he was talking about. She offered him an apology and asked him if she had embarrassed him with what she said earlier, so anger was evident on his features. He asked her with extreme anger if she was asking seriously or if she was mocking him, and she answered him that she didn't understand the reason for his anger. She explained to him that she said that only because she wanted to make him feel a little better, so he repeated her question back to her in astonishment, wondering if she had asked him to ignore her, despise her, and insult her for his own benefit. She explained her logic to him, saying that he should ignore, despise, and insult her, because that is the way he always treated her. And she continued that she told him that he shouldn't force himself to be kind, wondering what the problem was in that. She guessed in herself that the reason might be that she, the person he is supposed to hate intensely, acts as if she will sacrifice herself for him, and he doesn't like that. But she reassured herself that if this is the case, there's no need to worry. She decided to announce her decision while the opportunity was available, so she told him with a broad smile not to worry, and that as of this day, she would resign. And she continued her words, asserting that she would disappear so his eyes would not fall on her again. So he looked at her in total shock and asked her what she just said. Saraphi felt overwhelming happiness, thinking that the solution is not to be in his field of vision, and wondered how she hadn't thought of this before, and resolved that she would give him his freedom. But her happiness didn't last long, for she remembered the kitchen matter and wondered in concern who would do the cooking if she resigned from her job. She asked the crown prince hesitantly if she could work for a little while longer until they find a new chef. The crown prince turned to leave while whispering that she is still as selfish as she always was, then told her coldly to do as she pleased, and that she never listened to his opinion before. Saraphi watched him walking away, thinking that it's strange, for this wasn't the way things were supposed to go. She wondered about the reason for his reaction that seemed like he had been hurt, and felt that she had committed a grave mistake. Later, while two soldiers were walking in the palace, Saraphi offered them a greeting, so the other soldier returned the greeting. Confusion appeared on the first soldier as he repeated, "Tomorrow at noon," so his companion asked him about the destination of the one he was talking to, wondering if he had seen a ghost or something of the sort. The crown prince appeared from behind them suddenly and asked disapprovingly if there were ghosts in Destian, so the two soldiers were terrified and called him by his title in extreme confusion. The two soldiers denied the matter immediately, asserting that it must have been a mistake on their part, and explained that they thought they saw Saraphi there, but it was just an optical illusion. The crown prince looked at them while crossing his arms and merely said that he understood the matter. Saraphi felt relief because she managed to escape him, for it was almost revealed, and she denounced in herself how she had cut all this distance away from the office only to find him there. She recalled in her mind Zephyr's warning to her that Raven is like a ticking time bomb, and that approaching him makes one lose their senses, so she decided that she must maintain a distance between them, for both of their sakes. While she was thinking about that, she realized it would be difficult to avoid bumping into him while wandering, so she wondered if there was a place she could hide and rest. Her feet led her to the Imperial Palace Library, which was massive and majestic as expected. She began wandering between the towering shelves, wondering to herself if she would find any romance novels among these books. But what caught her attention was a title completely different from her interests, a book about practical cooking magic, which brought back memories of her school days and made her wonder if such titles existed in all worlds. She didn't know that the Crown Prince was in the same place, browsing books in another corner of the library. She sat at one of the tables and became absorbed in reading the book, while he was watching her from a distance. Her concentration was interrupted by a sudden creaking sound, so she raised her head to find him standing before her, asking her seriously if she had transformed into a completely different person. He told her that lately she defies his expectations every time, so panic took hold of her inside, wondering why he is here, and why he continues appearing everywhere she goes. He asked her disapprovingly if his presence here was forbidden, so she replied in confusion that she was just wondering about the reason for his coming. He answered that he had always loved reading, and therefore he frequents the library often, then pointed out that this was the first time he saw her reading a book, which made her think to herself sarcastically that seeing someone like her reading must be shocking news. She explained to him that she entered driven by curiosity, then saw a book about cooking magic and began reading it. The Crown Prince was surprised by her interest in a magic book, so she explained to him that she heard that if she learned cooking magic, she would be able to cook more easily, and also storing food would become easier. Then, the Crown Prince asked her about the reason for her exerting all this effort now when she has announced that she will resign, which surprised her and made her wonder about the reason for his question. So she simply answered him that this is her job, and she continued explaining that if she could prepare tastier food more easily and quickly, it's natural she would want to learn. It seemed her words had convinced him, so he smiled a slight smile and said that he understands the matter. Their conversation was interrupted by the voice of an elegant lady who expressed her surprise at seeing them together in this place. She stepped forward and greeted the Crown Prince and Saraphi, saying it had been a long time. She asked them with a cunning smile what they were talking about while they were alone. She expressed her surprise at seeing them together in a place like this, and she continued her speech saying that their presence alone in a dimly lit place might arouse suspicion and push people to conclude wrong things. The lady asked the Crown Prince if he was worried, but he answered her coldly that he wasn't. The Crown Prince announced to her that he was busy and would leave now, and turned away from the lady. But the lady turned toward Saraphi suddenly and asked her how long it had been, and if she had felt lonely in her absence. Confusion took hold of Saraphi, who didn't recognize the lady's identity, but she guessed from her informal way of speaking that they must be friends, so she answered her in confusion that she didn't remember how long it had been. The lady reminded her that she was grumbling intensely about her traveling on a 3-month trip, and wondered how she forgot the matter so quickly. So Saraphi was struck with embarrassment as she claimed that the matter had slipped her mind. The lady commented on the big change in her appearance, clothes, and makeup, saying she looks like a completely different person, and asked her if something had happened to her, while Saraphi was in confusion. Then she approached her to examine her closely with a curious look. While she was thinking about the matter, the lady added that Saraphi's presence in the library was a surprise in itself, then whispered to her sarcastically that they don't sell dresses here. So Saraphi answered her calmly that she stopped by the library by chance and decided to read a book as long as she was there. The lady met her words with surprise and disapproval, wondering if she was joking again, and reminded her that she used to hate books and described them as boring, and wondered sarcastically since when she began pretending to be a researcher, and concluded that seeing Saraphi reading books is truly surprising. Saraphi explained that she felt the book might be interesting and useful in cooking, which piqued the lady's curiosity. The lady commented that she is truly amusing with her interest in cooking now, so Saraphi wondered to herself if she was praising her or mocking her. The lady suggested to her to leave this place that doesn't suit her and go shopping, and told her that her favorite designer is there, and that his new collection of dresses has just been released, inviting her to go together to see it. Saraphi thought she didn't know who her favorite designer was, but she apologized gently, saying she wishes to read more books and study magic now. The mention of magic surprised the lady greatly. The Crown Prince was watching them from a distance and commented that this response seems more logical for the original Saraphi character, who preferred to hire a wizard instead of learning magic herself. Saraphi was in confusion, thinking about what she should say so as not to arouse her friend's suspicions. She told her that she has changed her mind recently, and that she might have acted in a certain way in the past, but she is different now. She added that reading books is fun and cooking is rewarding, and that she feels happy when everyone enjoys her food. She admitted to her friend that, frankly, even when she reads books, she doesn't understand what they say, and that she hasn't been able to understand a single page so far. But she added with a smile that, despite that, it's fun. The Crown Prince watched the situation carefully, while the lady looked at her with strange expressions, then commented that she looks like a completely different person. The lady changed the subject suddenly and said she wouldn't stand in her way today, and suggested they go together next time. So Saraphi agreed reluctantly. The lady turned to leave, but she thought to herself with a wicked look that she doesn't know what happened to Saraphi, but she certainly won't be able to leave her ever. After her departure, Saraphi decided she needed to read a slightly easier book today. The next day, Saraphi met the same lady again and recognized her as the girl she met yesterday, whose name seems to be Rosalyn. And Rosalyn had come to the library to search for books about fashion. Rosalyn suggested again that they go shopping since they have met and buy that dress from the designer she mentioned yesterday. Saraphi tried to apologize, explaining she came here to read. Rosalyn expressed her annoyance, reminding her that she refused her invitation yesterday too, and wondered if they were no longer friends. Saraphi denied that strongly and tried to clarify the matter that she really wanted to read, but Rosalyn thought to herself that she knew she would never give up on her. Rosalyn showed her happiness and invited her to join her today, so Saraphi agreed reluctantly. Rosalyn pulled her with her enthusiastically, and Saraphi felt she had been swept away in her fast pace. While they were walking, Saraphi decided she would read the book tomorrow. Rosalyn thought to herself sarcastically that Saraphi is truly a fool, and that she has fallen into her grip completely. But Saraphi felt that something was strange, for Rosalyn said they would go to see the dresses. And when they arrived, another lady welcomed them, and Rosalyn told her she heard that the new collection had been released, so she came to see it. Saraphi guessed that the original Saraphi character must have come here often, but she added to herself that that character wasn't normal anyway. The lady showed them this season's new collection, which consisted of a hat and clothes of strange design, which aroused Saraphi's extreme surprise. Saraphi suddenly remembered the ridiculous dresses that the original character possessed, and wondered if she had bought them all from this place, for they were strange dresses to the point it's difficult to distinguish them from pieces of worn-out cloth. Rosalyn asked her opinion on the new collection, considering it cute, so Saraphi answered hesitantly that it's good, but she thought to herself that the decorations are exaggerated and eccentric. Rosalyn suggested she try on one of the dresses because it would look suitable for her, but Saraphi refused gently, and Rosalyn insisted that she try them. The shop owner joined them and offered Saraphi another dress, asserting it would be great on her, but Saraphi tried to evade. Saraphi announced loudly that she has a lot of dresses at home and she is fine, in her attempt to end the situation. Both Rosalyn and the shop owner laughed, considering she was joking, but Saraphi asserted that she wasn't joking at all. Saraphi had to invent another excuse, so she claimed she had exhausted all her allowance and would return to buy another time, which aroused their extreme surprise and made Saraphi think that these people are surprised by everything normal she says. Rosalyn asked her if she didn't have money, so Saraphi answered that her father told her he would kick her out if she spent money as she pleased, which made Rosalyn comment with surprise that she didn't expect the Duke to say that. Rosalyn mocked Saraphi indirectly, but Saraphi thought that it's strange that her friends are eccentric like her, and that Rosalyn's taste in clothes is very strange. Rosalyn tried on one of the strange hats and asked Saraphi her opinion, so Saraphi likened her in herself to a peacock. The shop owner praised Rosalyn's taste, who decided to buy the hat. And Rosalyn continued choosing more clothes and thanked the shop owner for her help. After finishing shopping, the shop owner bid them farewell warmly, looking forward to their next visit. Saraphi told Rosalyn she would return home, but Rosalyn asked her to wait for a moment, which aroused Saraphi's resentment. Rosalyn surprised her by presenting a gift to her, saying she chose it for her. Rosalyn explained she couldn't buy any souvenirs from her trip and asked her to be satisfied with this gift as an alternative. Saraphi realized this was the reason Rosalyn insisted on inviting her to shop, for she was feeling bad because she didn't bring her a gift. Saraphi was in confusion. She appreciated this gesture, but she couldn't accept the dress she saw earlier and wondered what she should do in such a situation. Rosalyn asked her in a sad tone if her gift was annoying to her. Saraphi recalled painful memories from her previous life, where she always felt she was the only one who cared for others, and how some accused her that she has no feelings and that no one loves her. She realized she was indeed indifferent to others. Saraphi decided she must express her feelings in words so they reached the other person, so she apologized to Rosalyn, saying she didn't mean to hurt her. She thanked Rosalyn for her gift and promised her she would cherish it, which made Rosalyn very happy, who told her she would have been frustrated if she didn't accept it. Rosalyn asked her opinion on the gift, so Saraphi thought that she wouldn't wear the dress anyway, but she answered her with some hesitation that she thanks her, and she is right. So Rosalyn showed her happiness that the design had won her admiration, while Saraphi was sure that this whole matter was a trap. Rosalyn noticed that Saraphi hadn't been putting on makeup lately, and asked her if she had forgotten how to put it on, and offered to put it on her herself. She invited her enthusiastically to go to her house. The request to go now surprised her, and she felt shock. Saraphi began feeling dizzy and tired, and thought she might collapse if the matter continued in this way, and that she needs to return home and rest. She apologized to Rosalyn and told her she would return now, so Rosalyn showed her disappointment, but she understood the matter as long as she was tired. Saraphi thanked Rosalyn, and the latter suggested they play until morning next time. The last words gave Saraphi chills and exhaustion just thinking about them. After returning to the palace, she fell to the ground from sheer exhaustion, whispering that she could no longer even stand. Rosalyn's wicked words echoed in her mind as she imagined her inviting her to play until morning, making her scream, asking her to stop. Meanwhile, in the library, Rosalyn was wandering among the books feeling bored, wondering when Saraphi would come and what they could do for fun today. Suddenly, she felt someone nearby, but she saw no one, so she guessed she was imagining things, while Saraphi was hiding behind one of the shelves, feeling she had miraculously survived and deciding she had to get out of there immediately. Later, the Crown Prince was walking in one of the corridors, and one of his guards asked him if he was going to the library again today. The guards commented that the Crown Prince was a truly amazing person. They had known him since he was a child and had never seen him slack off from his work even for a single day. The Crown Prince arrived at his destination feeling exhausted, wishing he could take a nap like someone he knew, while he heard the soldiers whispering about his physical strength and envying him. He thought that if he could, he would lie down on the ground right now, just like Saraphi, who was sprawled out there. He approached her and asked what she was doing there, and she was startled and called him by his title in shock. Saraphi began to explain the situation to him in great confusion, clarifying that she went to the library and found Rosalyn waiting for her, and when she tried to escape, she thought Rosalyn might see her, so she ended up crawling on the ground. The Crown Prince looked at her, thinking that she possessed a true talent for provoking people's anger in new ways every day. He told her that he was about to head to the library himself, and she replied that this was good for him. He wondered if that was all, and she asked him if there was something else. He told her that he couldn't help but feel sorry for her as she crawled on the cold floor, and offered to help her just this once, but she politely refused his request. The Crown Prince offered to bring her the book she wanted, but she told him that it was fine and that she had already gotten used to this place. So the Crown Prince wondered in amazement how she adapted so quickly, and she asked him to take care of himself anyway. He was shocked by her reply. Her words puzzled him. He had gone out of his way to be kind to her, but she rejected him while lying on the ground, then told him to take care of himself. How did she dare do that? He thought angrily that this was the height of insolence and wondered if a charge of insult should be brought against her. Anger possessed him as he thought that until recently she was following him everywhere. So why was she suddenly treating him as if she hated him? He recalled past situations when she would ask him why he didn't eat the cookies she prepared, and he would answer that he didn't want them. And when she would ask him why he always treated her like someone he hated, he would answer frankly because he actually hated her. He felt he was in no position to say anything about the matter. In another situation, Rosalyn surprised him with her appearance, saying what a coincidence it was to meet him in such a place, and offered him some cookies she had baked. And she offered for him to have some if he liked. Later, one of the soldiers was eating cookies happily, and told his comrade that the Crown Prince gave them to him suddenly when he said he was hungry. The soldier was starving and felt dizzy. His comrade told him to stop the silly joking and eat the cookies, for the Crown Prince was busy now. But one of the soldiers spat out the cookies in disgust, wondering what this disgusting thing was, while Saraphi watched the situation from a distance. The soldier commented that he had fallen into the Crown Prince's trap and wondered what he did to make him hate him so much. The soldier realized that the Crown Prince might have learned that he was the one who sent the happiness letter. Suddenly, the Crown Prince appeared behind Saraphi, realizing that this was the soldier's doing, which aroused her confusion. And he told her that he didn't know about the matter before, and therefore he had besieged Demian, and that he would apologize to him later. Saraphi turned to him, wondering what he would do with the boy who sent the letter and what he would do about him. He answered with sarcastic coldness that he was thinking of cutting off his head, so she froze in her place from the horror of the words. But he soon laughed, saying he was only joking. Saraphi felt terrified, thinking it was truly scary when it comes from someone capable of actually doing it, even if it was just a joke. The Crown Prince sat beside her and told her he would tell her something interesting because he had frightened her, and asked her if she knew that this place where they are sitting cannot be seen from the library, which surprised her. Then he presented her with the book she wanted to read, and she asked him in wonder how he knew that. He answered that she was repeating all the time that she wanted to learn cooking magic, and that of course he would know, for there is nothing in Destian hidden from him. Saraphi wondered to herself if she should take the book from him. The Crown Prince ordered her to take it, but she refused, saying she was fine, so he insisted, asking for the reason. She shouted in his face that she was trying to maintain a distance between them, and that staying with her was dangerous. She continued that this was for his own protection, begging him to understand, but he described her words as terrible and demanded she explain herself. Saraphi began to explain while feeling embarrassed. She told him that the elf told her that if she stayed by his side, his feelings would become unstable, and he would turn into a ticking time bomb that could explode at any moment. He replied, wondering if that elf was the one who told her to stay away from him, and she answered in the affirmative. He shouted in her face angrily, asking her to compose herself and not let a child's words affect her like that. She told him that elves have sharp instincts and can read human feelings, and that the elf said his feelings only become unstable when she is near him. He replied angrily, asserting that he knew that. He explained to her that they were in a dangerous forest where anything could happen, and she was the only civilian there, and that it was strange for him not to be tense about her. She apologized to him, saying she didn't know he thought that way, and that she truly thought he hated her. He advised her not to misunderstand, and that he is committed to his position as a prince, and regardless of his personal feelings, protecting people is his duty. He added that he possesses power on a completely different level from ordinary citizens, and that the matter was nothing special for him, and he didn't do it out of affection for her, asking her not to misunderstand. She replied that she didn't. The crown prince thought angrily that that elf was spreading ridiculous rumors, and that he must go to the forest now to discipline him, while Saraphi was in confusion, not knowing what to do. She wondered if this was the only magic book. She wished there were more books like this, for the more there were, the more useful they would be for study. But she realized that the problem was that she couldn't go to the library. She thought of a solution to this problem while looking at the crown prince. The crown prince asked her if she needed more, and she rejoiced in secret because her plan had succeeded. He asked her if she had studied magic before, for he had never heard that she had done so, and she answered that this was the first time. He was surprised that she was reading books then, wondering how she did it. She answered that the reason was that she wanted to learn magic. His confusion increased, and he asked her about the reason for her reading books when she hadn't learned magic before, explaining that she wouldn't understand them. Then he asked her if she had taken the magical ability test. His words puzzled her, and she wondered what this test was. He looked at her hesitantly for a moment, then asked her to follow him. Saraphi thought that learning magic requires a basic condition. For one, first had to make sure they possessed magical ability, which is the power necessary to use magic. Thus, she finally found herself coming to take this fateful test. She stood before a massive door and asked the crown prince if this was the place where they could measure magical power, and he confirmed that to her. Before she stepped forward, the crown prince told her there was something she must do first, which puzzled her. He grabbed her injured shoulder, and from his palm, a mysterious celestial light emitted. Saraphi felt amazement as she whispered that the pain was gone. She asked him in daze how he did that, and he answered that there was nothing special about it, and that once she learns magic, she will be able to do that too, which aroused her enthusiasm and desire to learn it soon. In short, Saraphi realized that he treated her shoulder so she could lift something, so she thought he did it for that purpose, but he told her there was no need for thanks. The crown prince pointed to an ordinary-looking stone and explained to her that the test was simple. All she had to do was hold it, for it is a stone that becomes lighter the stronger the magical power of its holder. And he warned her against underestimating it, for people with weak magical power cannot even lift it, and one might get hurt if they take it lightly. Saraphi extended her hand toward the stone, but she lifted it with total ease with one hand, which struck both Saraphi and the crown prince with daze alike. She wondered if this was the right stone, for she felt it was just an ordinary stone, but the crown prince assured her that this stone had never left this hall. The crown prince recalled in his memory how the elf's magic did not affect her the previous time, and a staggering possibility crossed his mind. Saraphi called his name while looking at the stone in confusion. The crown prince told her that perhaps they should perform some other tests. She looked at him in total confusion, not understanding what was going on. Saraphi suddenly found herself surrounded by a large group of wizards wearing strange robes, while the crown prince stood beside her. One of them wondered why they were all summoned. The wizards looked as if they hadn't seen sunlight for a long time. One of them grumbled about the intensity of the light, and another wondered how long he had spent in his laboratory. Horror possessed her as she looked at them, and she thought of escaping before it was too late. While she wondered in confusion what was happening now, the crown prince reassured her that it wasn't dangerous, and that he would test her now, but she thought that the presence of all these people certainly meant the matter was significant, and asked him about the type of test. He explained to her that they would test her personality type and the type of magic that affects her, by having people use magic on her, which struck her with extreme shock. She asked him in amazement if he was using her as a test subject. He answered with a cunning smile that it was something like that, which made her freeze in her place from horror. The wizards showed their extreme enthusiasm and wondered if they could use any kind of magic, and lined up in a queue, suggesting turning her into a cat or a dog. They were interrupted by one of the senior wizards, who asked the old wizard if he wanted to test whether her ability could be neutralized, and wondered about the source of this magic and what the goal of this test was. The old wizard answered that he didn't know. His answer aroused the resentment of the wizard, who wondered if they should conduct more research on magic neutralization techniques, and if the defensive magic they created wasn't enough, and reminded him that he had praised them when they announced its update the previous day. The wizard shouted in the face of his colleagues who asked him what was happening, saying that he didn't know either, and that they should ask the Crown Prince themselves if they were curious. The Crown Prince addressed the wizards, explaining that their cooperation would help him a lot, and that he was researching magic and wanted the senior wizards to test it, and promised them a suitable reward. The Crown Prince's words impressed and touched the wizards. They enthusiastically announced that they would do their best for the Crown Prince, and would pour all their energy into this matter, and that it was time to show their true abilities. One of the wizards stepped toward Saraphi and announced it was time to start. One of the wizards began casting a spell aimed at lengthening Saraphi's hair, but nothing happened at all. Another wizard tried a spell to turn her into a cat, but once again, nothing happened, and the wizard commented that there was no reaction. The failed attempts continued. Someone even tried to turn her into a man, but in the end, nothing happened at all. The wizards praised the Crown Prince, expressing their admiration for the perfection of his experimental magic. The Crown Prince thanked them for their hard work, and they praised his humility, considering that his name would be recorded in history. Then they asked permission to leave, and Saraphi felt relief. After their departure, the Crown Prince felt exhausted from the presence of all these people, and Saraphi noticed that he was an introverted person. The Crown Prince told her he was expecting that, but her body was stranger than he imagined. He explained to her that she has a body that repels or neutralizes any magic cast upon her, and that is why the elf's healing magic and the wizard's magical power didn't work on her. No magic or magical power can affect her, except for one person. He pointed to himself, saying that this person is him, which aroused her extreme surprise. He told her that he knows what she is thinking and that her face expressions reveal her question, "Why?" and that they are having a real conversation now. He admitted that, frankly, he doesn't know the reason either, but the indisputable fact is that only his magic was able to affect her. Saraphi wondered to herself if the matter was complicated because she was inhabiting another body, or if the original Saraphi's obsessive love had developed her body so that it only accepts Raven. Her thoughts were interrupted by the realization that this isn't important now, and she wondered anxiously if this means she cannot learn magic. The Crown Prince told her that it's different. Her not being affected by others' magic has nothing to do with her using her own magic. This, of course, assuming she possesses magical power. Saraphi was surprised, pointing out that she was able to use the teleportation magic created by someone else. He explained to her that this is a type of magic that links places and moves the person between them, and that it most likely works because it doesn't involve the flow of magic into the person's body and affecting it. She held the book and wondered if she could then find the magic in this book. The Crown Prince mocked her, likening it to a child who doesn't even know how to hold a pen and tries to write a novel. She apologized to him, saying she only wanted to learn quickly. Rosalyn was watching the situation from a distance with an angry look. The Crown Prince told her that if she wanted to learn magic to this extent, he would teach her himself, and ordered her to come to his office during breaks starting tomorrow. In his office later, the Crown Prince was examining the magic book and thought that it was very difficult for someone who knows nothing to read. He decided that if she faced difficulty, there would be no problem in adjusting the difficulty level to about this extent. Suddenly, he heard someone tapping on the door and permitted them to enter. Rosalyn entered, asking him what they should do. The Crown Prince rose from his seat suddenly and asked what was happening. Rosalyn was grumbling that Saraphi wouldn't play with her. The Crown Prince asked her to leave because he was busy, but she begged him to listen to her. Elsewhere, Saraphi was walking, thinking that she wondered if things were all right like this. It's wonderful that Raven became kinder, but she couldn't help but worry when she thought of the original story. Saraphi noticed that the Crown Prince's office door was open, and heard Rosalyn asking the Crown Prince if he was sure there was nothing. Rosalyn told the Crown Prince that this was dangerous and that Saraphi had been acting strangely lately, and she continued that she believes he should know about this, and that he will be shocked when he hears it. Then she revealed to him with artificial shock that Saraphi was trying to cook, considering the matter a scandal. She pointed out to the Crown Prince that he is the master of the place where Saraphi works as a chef, but the Crown Prince didn't seem surprised at all, and asked her coldly if she was still here. Outside, Saraphi was in confusion, wondering what she should do, and if she should return now. Rosalyn struck the table angrily and asked the Crown Prince if he was truly satisfied with this situation. She reminded him that he had gone through interesting experiences because of Saraphi, all thanks to her, and she whispered to him cunningly, reminding him of the incident of planting drugs in his food. She expressed her disbelief at how he had let her off so easily, asserting she was worried about him. The Crown Prince answered her sharply that he isn't so weak that he needs her worry. Then he ordered her to leave, saying he wouldn't punish her for entering without permission, but she had to get out now. Rosalyn commented that that woman's matter is truly tragic, and she explained that she was talking about Marette, who did nothing but have tea with him, but Saraphi killed her because of that. Saraphi recalled her maid's talk, who told her that that lady was so famous that there wasn't a single person in the country who didn't know her. And Saraphi wondered if there was another person as crazy as the original Saraphi. The maid told her that that lady planted a stimulant in the Crown Prince's food and tried to sneak into his bedroom that night, but was caught and driven out, and reminded her that she was very angry at that time, and described her deed as a crime, and that they found difficulty in preventing her from going to kill her. So Saraphi wondered if she wasn't the one who snuck into the bedroom. The maid continued that that woman, after being rejected, committed suicide by drinking poison directly in front of the Crown Prince, considering that she was on a completely different level of madness. Saraphi thought that the original Saraphi might have stalking tendencies, but she wouldn't have gone as far as putting a stimulant in his food or committing suicide before him, and asked her maid about that woman's name. The maid answered her that her name was Marette, so Saraphi was struck with a horrific shock, realizing that this is impossible. She wondered in horror if she had really killed her. Not her exactly, but the original Saraphi. She realized that the matter was no longer just her being a crazy woman, but that she had inhabited the body of a killer and a psychopath, and preferred returning to being the ordinary crazy woman from the original story. She thought that she never expected to face such a big shock. Rosalyn told the Crown Prince that Saraphi didn't just poison Marette, but even tried to attack him after planting a stimulant in his food for him, and that she doesn't understand how she dares stay by his side, while Saraphi realized that she was the one who used the stimulant too. Rosalyn continued that if it weren't for the Brinius family, Saraphi wouldn't be in this world anymore, and that the matter is truly tragic. The Crown Prince interrupted her with a cold question, reminding her that she is supposed to be Saraphi's friend. Confusion appeared on Rosalyn, and the Crown Prince told her that his judgment seems wrong based on her position. Rosalyn claimed that Saraphi is a precious friend to her, but there cannot be more victims like Marette, and she expressed her concern that her dear friend might choose the wrong path again, and that this is all that worries her. The Crown Prince looked at Rosalyn with coldness and disgust. He thought that talking to this woman gives him chills for some reason. The Crown Prince commented sarcastically that she is still interested in others' affairs, as is her habit, and she replied that the reason is that she is kind-hearted by nature. The Crown Prince smiled a sarcastic smile and said he had forgotten this matter, and that thanks to her he had remembered many things he had forgotten, and that she might be useful to him. Rosalyn showed her happiness that she was of use, and the Crown Prince thanked her for that. He told her that he has many governance affairs he must attend to, and he cannot waste more time, and promised her he would make sure to reward her as she deserves later, and that a lady considerate of others' feelings like her would certainly understand. Rosalyn apologized for taking from his precious time while he was busy, and asked permission to leave. As she was leaving, she met Vice Commander Demian. She looked at him with admiration, thinking that he is very handsome, but it's a pity he is just a subordinate of the Crown Prince. After she left, Demian asked Saraphi if she was all right. She answered in confusion that she heard everything, so he asked her if she meant, so she replied that she was talking about the fact that she is a killer, a psychopath, and a predator, and asked Demian in confusion if he already knew about the matter. But before he answered in the affirmative, she interrupted him, saying, "That makes things easier then." She grabbed his arm and asked him to follow her to talk in a private place, which aroused his confusion. She explained to him that the truth is she had injured her head a while ago, so he asked if she was referring to the kitchen explosion incident. She told him that her memory had become blurred since then, and that she was in a bit of a difficult situation, so Demian understood the matter. He asked her how exactly he could help her, so she asked him to tell her everything he knows about the accident. Demian told her that before coming to Destian, he heard a certain rumor about a noble lady who tried to assault the Crown Prince by planting a stimulant in his food and sneaking into his bedroom. But after the Crown Prince rejected her, she committed suicide before him. He asserted that the name he heard at that time was the same one Rosalyn mentioned earlier, which is Marette. Saraphi asked him the meaning of "at that time," so he explained to her that since he began helping the Crown Prince here in Destian, he learned the hidden truth about the issue. Saraphi wondered in wonder about what that hidden truth was. Demian revealed to her that the person who visited the Crown Prince's bedroom that day was... At that moment, the young Crown Prince was waking in his bed to the sound of knocking on the door, and asked about the knocker's identity, but was surprised by someone's presence before him. He asked the servants who entered suddenly about the meaning of this, and about the reason for their coming in the middle of the night, and directed his question to one of the maids who was tasting the food for him. The maid knelt before him, feeling relief for his safety. The crown prince wondered in shock about a stimulant being in the food he ate. One of the maids told him she was worried that something might have happened to him, but seeing him perfectly safe relieves her mind, for she thought something irreversible had happened. The maid commented that because of the crown prince's refusal to taste the food to detect toxins, such situations happen. The crown prince wondered coldly what worries the servants to this extent, reminding them that he had defeated a dragon. So did they forget that? One of the maids told him they shouldn't underestimate this matter, and continued with concern that the slightest problem might cost them their heads. The maid realized she had overstepped her bounds, so she bowed to him, apologizing profusely. She asked him for pardon and forgiveness. The crown prince told her he wasn't angry and asked her to lift her head, wondering if he had punished any of them before. He reassured her that no one else knows of this incident, and that he won't tell anyone, so there's no need to worry. The maid thanked him profusely, but he told her he was the one who should apologize, and promised her he wouldn't refuse tasting the food to detect toxins from now on. The servants bowed to him in deep gratitude, and one of the maids asked him that if he feels unwell, he must inform them immediately, and he agreed to that. The crown prince thought that whatever he said, it would likely be to no avail. For them, the only meaning of their existence is for him to stay perfectly safe in his correct place. And suddenly the crown prince felt someone's presence. He opened the door to find Saraphi wearing an elegant black dress and realized it was she who was there the whole time. He said he suspected the matter, but he didn't expect she would go this far. Saraphi asked him if there was anyone suspicious. The crown prince wondered in confusion what she was talking about. She explained to him that she was asking if there was anyone suspicious, or anyone who tried to attack him. The crown prince asked her what on earth she was talking about, and ordered her out, considering what she was doing acting, and that he knew she wasn't in her right mind. But there are lines that shouldn't be crossed. The person who was in the room disappeared, and Saraphi wondered in shock who that was. The crown prince sighed while watching her as she looked out the window. Saraphi noticed a strand of red hair on the window, and realized the intruder was a woman with long hair. She confirmed to herself that someone was certainly here, and wondered if someone had broken into the room, and if he had allowed someone to enter. He shouted in her face, angrily asking her to stop. She tried to convince him that it wasn't a lie, and that someone was really here. He ordered his guards to take her away, so she called his name in despair. She begged him to believe her, and that someone was hiding in the bedroom. The door closed behind her, and the crown prince sighed, feeling that his patience had run out. He thought this was the limit of his patience. Elsewhere, the crown prince's arrival was announced, and he asked permission to enter. He was received by an older man, who welcomed him, saying he hadn't seen him for a long time, and asked him the reason for his early coming. The crown prince told his father, the emperor, that there was a matter he wished to speak with him about. The emperor told him he had heard from Duke Villainess, and that Saraphi had come to see him last night. The emperor asked him with a cunning smile what happened, and if they spent the night together, so the crown prince denounced the question, saying he pays no attention to Saraphi at all. The emperor reminded him that the duke suggested they get married, and that this would be a happy occasion. The crown prince insisted he was uninterested in her, and that he believed he had told him so many times before. The emperor criticized him for pushing her away always, and asked him why he wasn't kind to her as they were in their childhood. The emperor continued that the Villainess family is one of the most prestigious noble families in the country, and that he should be happy that a daughter from this family loves him. But the crown prince interrupted him to tell him that Saraphi had planted a stimulant in his food. Silence prevailed for moments. The emperor wondered mockingly if he was suggesting arresting the daughter of the Villainess family, and the crown prince called him angrily. The duke's arrival was announced, so the emperor commented coldly that they had finally arrived and that they were slow in moving. The emperor told the crown prince that he could return now. And before the emperor left, the crown prince stopped him and shouted at him angrily, telling him he cares about dealing with nobles more than his interest in his son. The emperor replied that he knows how the economy of this country works. The emperor thought that everything is thanks to the nobles, and that only when the nobles bow their heads to the emperor is the nation's system maintained. For this reason, and to prevent them from thinking about unnecessary matters, he must sometimes give them a taste of sweet nectar, and that interacting with the nobles is the emperor's duty. The crown prince confronted him angrily, wondering if he knew what the nobles he loves so much are doing behind his back. The emperor answered him that he perhaps doesn't understand because of his youth, and that he lacks flexibility. The crown prince replied that if he acted on whims, heads would fall, and one mistake might cost the lives of tens of thousands of soldiers, and that if he were lenient, everyone around him would have died already. The emperor told him that being strict like this won't make him a good emperor. He ordered one of the guards to open the door. The crown prince wondered while the emperor was leaving if the reason for the death of everyone around the emperor was his flexibility, and thought sarcastically that on that throne he climbed by trampling those around him, he alone can smile a gentle smile. And what a blessing. The emperor looked at him angrily and asked him what he just said, but the emperor soon smiled, considering what he said very good, and that it seems he has acquired another necessary trait to be an emperor, and that this relieves him. The emperor left, while the crown prince was thinking about what he expected from his father. A few days later, the crown prince was in his office feeling tired, but he noticed he felt a strange clarity of mind. He recalled the memory of Saraphi presenting him with cookies, and how he asked her to stay away from him. He realized that peace is kept because Saraphi is not here. He thought she represents an annoyance to society, and that he wants to get rid of her, but wondered if there was any way for that, then permitted someone to enter. The maid told him of Miss Marette's arrival. The crown prince realized he had forgotten, for today was the appointment, and agreed to meet her. The maids were watching the crown prince as he walked away, and they noticed his mood seemed unusually good, and they agreed among themselves on that. The crown prince felt someone's gaze staring at him, which aroused his confusion. The maids engaged in a whispered conversation, where one wondered if this was the first time the crown prince had tea alone with a lady, while another expressed her curiosity about the nature of his relationship with Miss Marette. For the third to guess they might have a special relationship. Their speculations continued, so they expected Marette might confess her feelings, and that the matter might end with them dating. The crown prince interrupted them suddenly, telling them he hears everything that goes on between them, so they apologized immediately in confusion, justifying their curiosity that they were happy for him. The crown prince explained to them sternly that it isn't a confession of love, and warned them against misunderstanding, so they submitted to his command in silence. And in the palace garden, the crown prince was sitting with Miss Marette, and began the talk saying he heard she has a matter she wishes to talk with him about. Marette answered him hesitantly that she wishes so indeed, while the crown prince was sipping tea and thinking about the word confession the maids mentioned. And suddenly, Marette confessed her love for him, which struck him with surprise and he almost choked on his drink. She corrected her words quickly, asserting that he doesn't have to reciprocate the feelings, and that just seeing him makes her happy. The crown prince appeared touched by her words, while she continued her talk that the happiness of the one you love is her happiness too, and finished her confession asserting she believes that with all her heart. The crown prince couldn't help himself and released a low laugh, so Marette asked him if he was mocking her, but he assured her he certainly doesn't do that. Marette took a sip of tea while she was in confusion. The crown prince told her that this was the first time he received such a sudden confession. Then he praised her with a smile, describing her as a pure and warm-hearted personality. Then he noticed Marette's distraction, so he asked her if something was wrong, while he was thinking that perhaps he had overlaughed. He offered her a formal apology, and explained to her that the reason for his laugh wasn't mocking her feelings at all. And in a moment, his features changed to a dark look, for Marette to fall suddenly on the ground, and he asks help from the servants. The maids rushed to her, while the crown prince ordered them in a sharp tone to summon a doctor immediately. One of the maids called him with concern, and meanwhile, Saraphi was hiding among the bushes and watching the scene in shock. The crown prince turned with extreme anger toward her hiding place while shouting threateningly. Saraphi was struck with terror while muttering, denying her involvement in the matter. Saraphi recalled in her mind the scene of Marette adding a mysterious powder to the teapot. Saraphi realized the horrific truth and confirmed that Marette was the one who planted the stimulant in the tea, and thinks with concern about what she should do and whether to spill the tea and leave. But soon a wicked smile was drawn on Saraphi's face, and she decided she needed a real and suitable revenge. Saraphi used stones to distract Marette away from the table. Marette moved in the direction of the sound, believing that the crown prince had finally arrived. Then Marette heard another sound in the direction of the garden entrance, so she headed toward it. And at the entrance, she was stopped by one of the maids who offered her help, but Marette seemed confused and hesitant to answer. Marette asked the maid with concern about the time of the crown prince's arrival, so the latter answered her that she believes he will arrive soon. While Saraphi was switching the cup, Marette thanked the maid and decided to return to the table until the crown prince comes. Marette returned to the tea table in the garden and noticed that something seemed different from what it was before, which aroused her confusion. And meanwhile, Saraphi was watching her from afar while wondering with concern if Marette had discovered what she did. Marette tried to hide her tension by pretending to be calm and contemplating the beauty of the flowers, commenting that her nerves had calmed a little. But Saraphi had resolved to expose her before Raven and tell him she planted a stimulant in his drink to embarrass her. But what happened was shocking to everyone, for Marette fell suddenly and the crown prince shouted asking for help and ordered everyone to summon a doctor immediately, while Saraphi stood in a state of daze, not grasping what happened. The crown prince flew into a rage while directing his sharp gazes towards Saraphi, threatening her. Saraphi told the crown prince that she found last night a strand of hair in his bedroom and that it was the same color as Marette's hair. Saraphi was struck with panic, for she remembered she tried to tell him of someone's presence in his room, but he didn't believe her then. Saraphi continued explaining the situation to the Crown Prince, clarifying that she was worried about their meeting alone, so she came to check on them and saw Marette planting something in his cup, and added she thought it was a stimulant again, so anger possessed her, and she switched the two cups to make Marette feel shame. Then she revealed to him the shocking truth, which is that Marette had put poison in his cup. And while the Crown Prince was in a state of shock, one of his assistants stepped toward him. The assistant informed the Crown Prince that the investigations revealed the presence of the same poisonous compound found in the teacup on Marette's dress too, and therefore, the incident was considered a suicide. But the Crown Prince refused this conclusion a categorical refusal, for he believed in the bottom of his heart that Marette would never kill herself, and was perfectly certain she had been killed. And in the present, Demian explained to Saraphi that in actual fact, the investigations showed no categorical evidence proving she was the one who put the poison, and added that in light of these circumstances, accusing the daughter of the prestigious Brinius family was a very difficult decision, even for the Crown Prince. And for this reason, the final conclusion reached was that Marette had ended her life herself. Saraphi commented that the Crown Prince, despite that, must have suspected her until the end. Doubt possessed her, and she wondered to herself if she really killed her. She asked Demian for his opinion, and he answered her that he doesn't know the truth, but he doesn't believe she is the doer. And when she asked him about the reason for his belief he answered simply, "It's just a feeling he has." Saraphi looked at him with amazement, for she didn't expect anyone to trust her, then thanked him for his words. Later, while Saraphi was sitting absent-minded, her maid, Emily, noticed that a matter was occupying her mind. Saraphi was holding the pink hair strand, and told her maid she doesn't remember anything about it, and that she is in confusion and doesn't know whom she should ask regarding it. Emily initiated her with a bright smile, and suggested she ask her. Saraphi asked her maid if she knew anything regarding the pink lock of hair. The maid advised her to think carefully, pointing out that there might be someone else who possesses the same hair color. The image of a young lady with pink hair flashed in Saraphi's mind, and she wondered if it was Rosalyn. Saraphi recalled a previous memory when Rosalyn whispered to her that the Crown Prince was meeting his lover secretly in his bedroom that night, urging her to go and discover the matter for herself. Saraphi initially rejected the idea, considering it impossible. Rosalyn wondered about her excessive confidence, so Saraphi explained to her that the Crown Prince leaves for his office early, works hard all day, then trains vigorously, and returns to his residence immediately after that, asserting that he has no time to meet women and that what she was saying was just a rumor. But Rosalyn grabbed her hand firmly and reminded her that the Crown Prince leads the army, and wondered if someone like him would find it difficult to move secretly and avoid people's eyes, guessing that perhaps he had been holding secret meetings inside the palace all this time. Rosalyn's words struck Saraphi with shock and anxiety. Rosalyn tried to calm her down and suggested she go and see for herself, but Saraphi completely rejected the idea. Rosalyn was surprised by her refusal and asked her for the reason, so Saraphi told her that the Crown Prince himself had told her that he does not care about women. Saraphi continued to defend the Crown Prince, asserting that he would not lie about such a matter, and that if he were interested in someone, he would have told her frankly. Furthermore, he would not hold secret meetings inside the palace, but would go out to enjoy his time outside given his personality. Anxiety was evident on Rosalyn, while Saraphi confronted her, wondering if she had lied to her. Rosalyn became confused, but Saraphi followed up that there was only one conclusion if that were the case. Saraphi realized that there was someone targeting the Crown Prince and trying to sneak into his bedroom, and she resolved that she must protect him. In the present, the maid told her mistress that she had tried to stop her that day, but she did not listen to her, and in the end, she snuck into the Crown Prince's bedroom and claimed she found the lock of hair there. The maid added that the next day, when Rosalyn came to visit her, she was acting strangely. She mentioned that when her mistress went out for a few moments, Rosalyn was searching everywhere in the room, guessing that she must have been looking for the lock of hair. Saraphi understood the matter, but she reassured her maid that there was no need for concern. Saraphi recalled what happened a short while ago when she entered her room to find Rosalyn there, searching for something. Rosalyn claimed confusedly that she was looking for a hairpin she had dropped, but Saraphi told her that it didn't seem to be here, so Rosalyn added that she had just bought it. Saraphi asked her about its design and offered to bring it to her if she found it, but Rosalyn refused and asked her to keep it for herself, then suddenly fell onto the bed. Saraphi asked her with concern if she was okay, and Rosalyn answered that it wasn't serious. Saraphi advised her to rest at home, but Rosalyn told her she came because she was worried about her, wondering if she had been scolded for sneaking into the Crown Prince's bedroom. Saraphi reassured her that it was fine, and that the Crown Prince was a bit angry, but there was no problem. Rosalyn apologized to Saraphi, claiming the rumor was false, but Saraphi surprised her by saying that someone was actually there. Rosalyn wondered in amazement what she meant, so Saraphi told her that she saw someone escaping through the window. She whispered to her that she found a lock of hair as evidence and that she only needed to find out who it belonged to. Rosalyn asked her about the hair color, and Saraphi answered that it was red. Saraphi pretended to be puzzled, wondering who would do something as daring as that. Rosalyn looked at her with disgust and thought to herself how foolish she was. In another scene, Rosalyn suggested to Saraphi that the lock of hair might belong to Marette. She added that the hair color looked similar and that she was the first person who came to mind when thinking of red hair. So Saraphi nodded in agreement. Saraphi remembered how she used to think that Marette was a good person. Rosalyn took advantage of the situation and mentioned that Marette had been interested in the crown prince for a while and that it was very possible. Then the maid asked her mistress in surprise about Marette, and she answered in the affirmative, but the maid pointed out that the hair color was also the same as Rosalyn's hair color. Saraphi replied angrily, wondering about the point of her words and asserting that Rosalyn would not do something like that, and that she was helping her out of kindness only. The maid backed down and answered her hesitantly. After several days, the maid was in the market, and after she bought what her mistress requested, only the perfume remained to be bought. The maid glimpsed two people from a distance, and realized they were Rosalyn and Marette. The two ladies were whispering, and it appeared they were careful not to be seen by anyone. Then they left. The maid hurried on her way to tell her mistress what she saw. When she arrived, she was in a state of shock, thinking that Rosalyn had already preceded her there. Saraphi was bidding farewell to Rosalyn, who was about to leave. Saraphi warned Rosalyn to be careful, which caught the attention of the maid who was watching the situation. The maid called her mistress and told her she had something important to tell her. Saraphi asked her what it was. The maid told her that she saw Rosalyn and Marette together in the market whispering, and they were watching their surroundings cautiously. Saraphi replied that this was normal. The maid was surprised by her reaction and wondered if she knew about it beforehand. Saraphi explained to her that Marette was the one who planted the stimulant, and that Rosalyn was the one who asked her if she had done so. She added that Marette has a crush on Raven, and that she plans to confess to him and asked to meet him privately. The maid was shocked and wondered if this was true. Saraphi confirmed the matter, and for this reason, Marette is undoubtedly the culprit. The maid wondered if her mistress truly believed this, pointing out that there might be another possibility, but Saraphi interrupted her firmly, asserting that they have no time for this, and that Marette is trying to meet the crown prince alone to confess to him, and that she is waiting for another chance to plant the stimulant for him. She resolved that they must stop her before Raven becomes a victim of her schemes. Thus, the maid recalled how her mistress went to the meeting place, misunderstanding everything. The maid recalled in her mind how the crown prince confronted Saraphi angrily, accusing her of interfering and manipulating things from behind the scenes. Saraphi tried to defend herself, explaining that she told him that Marette was the one who put the poison and that she only switched the two cups. But the crown prince refused to believe her, asserting that Marette is not that kind of person. Saraphi confronted him with a rhetorical question, wondering if he thought she was the one who would do such a thing. The crown prince grew tired of the argument and shouted in her face, considering that the matter was repeating itself again. The maid remembered how her mistress returned after that and said something strange. Saraphi entered her room, so the maid asked her what happened and how things went. Saraphi told her that Raven believes she is the one who killed Marette. Despair possessed her as she thought about being considered a killer. A fit of frustration and anger overcame her. The maid tried to console her, realizing that she must be in a lot of pain. Saraphi sat down, wondering in despair why no one believes her. The maid asked her to tell her what happened in detail. Saraphi explained that she discovered that Marette put a stimulant in Raven's cup, so she switched the two cups. But she realized later that what she put was not a stimulant but poison, which shocked the maid. The maid concluded that this was logical. Marette tried to poison the crown prince, and this explains that she had no feelings for him. But Saraphi surprised her by saying that Marette is not the guilty one. The maid was surprised by her words and wondered about Marette's motive for putting the poison then. Saraphi asserted that she saw Marette put something in the cup with her own eyes, but she was puzzled. Saraphi repeated her assertion that Marette is not the true culprit. In other words, Saraphi summarized the situation, explaining that Marette wanted to meet the crown prince to confess to him, and that she, Saraphi, witnessed Marette putting something in the cup and switched them, and that what was in the cup was poison that led to Marette's death. Saraphi wondered how the crown prince and Saraphi, who were present, asserted that Marette was not the culprit, and the maid answered in the affirmative. Confusion took hold of Saraphi as she wondered what actually happened that day. At another time, the maids were talking about the upcoming fireworks festival, and one of them asked the other if she had someone to go with on a date, but the other refused to answer. Meanwhile, Saraphi entered and greeted them, so one of the maids asked her if her preparations for the festival were going well. While Saraphi was walking away, she remembered the maid's words that she saw Rosalyn and Marette whispering together. Saraphi resolved that she first needed to find out what was said in the conversation between Rosalyn and Marette and decided to ask Rosalyn directly. But the maid returned to tell her that Rosalyn had left early that morning. Saraphi decided then to go to the Imperial Palace, for she needed to ask Crown Prince Raven about what happened on that ill-fated day. Upon her arrival, she was certain that he had no engagements that day. She guessed that he must be somewhere inside the palace. She wandered through the spacious palace corridors looking for him, only to be surprised by seeing him standing with Rosalyn. The Crown Prince was thanking Rosalyn for telling him about something that had slipped his mind entirely. Rosalyn apologized, explaining that she only wanted to help. As a token of thanks, the Crown Prince offered for her to be his partner on the festival day. Rosalyn was struck with surprise and happiness. The Crown Prince confirmed his offer with a smile as he extended his hand to her. Rosalyn accepted the invitation, feeling very proud. The Crown Prince told her he would leave the task of preparations to her. Saraphi was watching the scene from a distance, wondering in shock if the two had started dating. Rosalyn noticed her presence and called her name in confusion. Rosalyn wondered anxiously how long she had been standing there, for she did not want to be seen in this situation. She explained that she never imagined the Crown Prince would care for her to this extent, and that she only wanted to help. Saraphi interrupted her and called her name, telling her she had a question to ask. Saraphi approached her forcefully, which puzzled Rosalyn, who felt that the atmosphere was different from usual, and that she might be slapped at any moment. Rosalyn exploded in anger, considering that it was not her fault if the Crown Prince liked her. While Saraphi asked her sharply what she had been talking about with Marette that day, Rosalyn was surprised by her question. Saraphi asked her to tell her in detail what went on between them, but Rosalyn did not expect this reaction. Rosalyn shouted to herself that the Crown Prince had just invited her out on a date and wondered how she could be this cold, so Saraphi repeated her question in shock. Rosalyn claimed she told her everything at the time, that Marette had a crush on the Crown Prince and asked her to arrange a meeting for them, and that she had merely conveyed the message. Saraphi asked her if that was all, and if there were any other details, no matter how small. Rosalyn denied that, then changed the subject, wondering if this was all that occupied her mind in this situation. Saraphi remembered the date and told her that it was great she was going on a date. She congratulated her with a smile and thought that this matter was suitable for her, as she would get rid of two annoying people at once. Saraphi told Rosalyn she had one last question to ask, and that it was an important matter for her. Then she asked her directly if it was true that Marette had a crush on Crown Prince Raven. Rosalyn was struck with surprise and confusion by the sudden question, while Saraphi watched her with a sharp gaze, making Rosalyn wonder how much she knew of the truth. Elsewhere, while Demian was training, Saraphi suddenly interrupted him. She sat beside him and asked if he could tell her more details about the tea meeting that brought the Crown Prince and Marette together. Demian told her that he didn't know much, but Marette herself said she had no feelings for the Crown Prince. And when Saraphi asked him if he had asked her why she said that, he answered in the negative. Saraphi explained to him that on that day, he and the Crown Prince said the same thing. Saraphi concluded that Marette did not love the Crown Prince, but at the same time, she was not the one who put the poison. Confusion took hold of her as she wondered what actually happened that day, and why both the original Saraphi and the Crown Prince said that Marette did not love him. She also wondered about the reason for Marette putting the poison in the Crown Prince's cup. Most importantly, why they didn't believe she was the culprit. She felt very frustrated and wanted to ask the Crown Prince himself. At that moment, the Crown Prince suddenly appeared and asked her what she was doing. He approached them and asked curiously what they were whispering about. Saraphi was surprised by his calmness, for she expected him to distance himself from her after learning of her past from Rosalyn. She hesitated to ask him, fearing she would stir old memories and provoke him, and thought it was better to walk away quietly. But Demian surprised her by asking the Crown Prince directly about what happened on the day he had tea with Marette. The Crown Prince told him that Saraphi was there too, so she confirmed that. Demian intervened, explaining to the Crown Prince that Saraphi had not fully recovered her memory after the explosion incident, and asked him to tell them what happened. The Crown Prince began to narrate the events, explaining that Rosalyn came to him one day and asked him to tell her that Marette wanted to meet him privately. He added that he refused at first, but she tried to persuade him with an interesting story, for she told him that meeting another woman might contribute to distancing him from Saraphi. Rosalyn continued that Saraphi has a mindset weaker than tofu, and that she wouldn't be able to bear it if he met another woman, which surprised Saraphi. The Crown Prince commented that the idea was somewhat new and that it was a method he hadn't tried before. Saraphi realized that the reason Rosalyn told her about the meeting place was to defeat her mentally, and wondered if Rosalyn was only pretending to be her friend to bully her. But Saraphi wondered why the Crown Prince, who hadn't said anything about Rosalyn before, was telling her all this suddenly. The Crown Prince asked her if she had learned a new truth, so she answered in confusion. Then he surprised her with a direct question, wondering if she had an idea about who killed Marette. Saraphi realized that the situation was very bad, for signs of confusion and extreme anxiety appeared on her. Horror took hold of her because she never expected the Crown Prince to ask her such a question, although she expected that something would happen. Meanwhile, the Crown Prince was thinking how Rosalyn was such a wicked and scary woman, and admitted that he might have been in such a state of extreme shock then that he completely forgot about the matter, then directed his speech directly to Saraphi to ask her if what he believed was true. Saraphi felt extreme anxiety, for she realized she might have stirred a painful memory in him, so she tried to evade the answer, claiming that her memories of that time were not entirely clear. But he met her words with a faint smile, then placed his hand before her and offered to help her recover those memories. He told her she must feel some pain, and at that moment, a loud scream erupted while she was recalling painful memories of the past in the palace. She remembered back to a scene of a meeting that brought the Crown Prince and Marette together in the garden, where he asked her if she had something she wished to tell him, so she answered hesitantly in the affirmative. While he was sipping his drink, he wondered to himself about the nature of this confession, for Marette to surprise him with her explicit confession of her love for him. She explained to him that she was hiding this secret out of shyness, but she no longer had a choice but to confess her feelings. And she continued her confession that she was in love with an extremely beautiful person, Lord Shahrazad. Confusion appeared on the Crown Prince from this sudden confession, and he asked her if she was talking about his relative, so she confirmed that to him enthusiastically. The Crown Prince wondered about the reason for her not going to meet him herself since she wanted that, pointing out that he is a friendly person and wouldn't be difficult to meet. She answered that she knows that, and that she was always watching him from afar, which aroused the Crown Prince's confusion, who wondered about her reason for doing that. She explained to him that her feelings for him weren't just simple admiration, and that she does not wish to be physically or emotionally close to him, for just staring at him makes her happy, and thinking of him gives her strength to continue in life, and that she is ready to offer anything for him, and expressed her extreme gratitude just because she was born in a world where there is someone like him, describing her love for him as unconditional love. The Crown Prince looked at her in shock, wondering to himself about what this strange woman was. The Crown Prince asked her if what she was saying seemed strange to him, so she answered in the affirmative. He tried to explain to her that what she feels is not a common feeling, but she asserted to him that it's okay even if he doesn't reciprocate her feelings, for just looking at him makes her happy. She added that the happiness of the one you love is her happiness too, and that this is what she believes from the depths of her heart. The Crown Prince couldn't help himself and released a low laugh, so she asked him if he was mocking her, and he asserted to her that he was completely serious about the matter. The Crown Prince told her that this was the first time he received such a sudden confession. Then he praised her with a smile, describing her as a pure and warm-hearted young lady. But he noticed her distraction suddenly, so he asked her if something was wrong, and at that moment, his features changed to a dark look. Marette suddenly fell on the ground unconscious, so the Crown Prince shouted asking for help and ordered a doctor be summoned immediately. Saraphi concluded at that moment that the person Marette loved was not the Crown Prince but was Shahrazad. And the reason that made both the Crown Prince and the original Saraphi not mention this fact is another matter entirely. Saraphi thought to herself that the reason for them not revealing the truth is that Marette herself told them that this is a secret she is ashamed to tell anyone. But this explanation stirred new questions in Saraphi's mind about Rosalyn's role in the story, for she began to think about the nature of the conversation between Rosalyn and Marette, which eventually led to presenting Marette to the Crown Prince. It was not logical for Saraphi for Marette to use the Crown Prince as a means to meet Shahrazad. Rather, the opposite is what would have seemed more logical. Furthermore, Marette did not wish to meet Shahrazad and talk to him directly because her love was not of this type, and Saraphi thought that she didn't know if this expression existed in this world, but Marette considered Shahrazad as her idol or her favorite character, a girl obsessed with him, present everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Demian was in a state of confusion, wondering about what just happened, so the Crown Prince explained to him that he had shared his memories with Saraphi. At that point, Demian wondered about his own role in all this, while the Crown Prince looked at him silently. The Crown Prince asked Saraphi about her feeling after learning a new truth, so Demian felt he had been ignored. But Saraphi returned and focused on the most important issue, asserting that despite everything, she still doesn't know the identity of the person who put the poison. Saraphi was struck with panic and suddenly realized she was talking about all this in front of someone who has a psychological trauma linked to her, and blamed herself for what she was saying. The Crown Prince interrupted her thoughts with his question about whether she thought Marette was lying, which surprised her. Saraphi wondered to herself about the secret of this calmness. For someone who believes she is the culprit, his behavior was strangely kind. She answered in the negative, explaining that Marette did not seem like someone who could lie at all. The Crown Prince agreed with her, adding that among all the people involved in the incident, she seems the most innocent. Saraphi felt relief and concluded that Marette is not the doer then, and thought she had survived imminent death, and thanked the Lord for that. But the Crown Prince warned her against jumping to hasty conclusions, reminding her that anyone can wear a mask. She looked at him in confusion, wondering to herself what he was trying to say. The Crown Prince asked her if she felt curious to know the identity of the true culprit. So she answered, of course, while she was praying in secret that it wouldn't be her. She asked him hesitantly if he knew who the doer was. The Crown Prince told her he has one person in his mind, but there are still some missing puzzle pieces that don't fit together. Saraphi stood thinking about the meaning of his words and those missing pieces. Later, Saraphi told her maid Emily that the person Marette was a fan of was Lord Shahrazad, so Emily was struck with extreme surprise. But Saraphi told her there was more. Emily shouted that she knew that, and reminded her mistress that she had told her several times that Lady Rosalyn seems dangerous and blamed her for not listening to her, and described Rosalyn as a terrible person for deceiving a pure young lady and committing such a wicked act, so Saraphi tried to calm her down. Saraphi realized she might have said something unnecessary, while annoyance appeared on Emily. Saraphi asked Emily to help her change her clothes. Emily called her mistress, who was sitting on her bed, and asked her to put on her clothes. Suddenly, Emily's features changed to seriousness, and she told her mistress that today is that special day. Saraphi wondered in confusion what she meant by that day. Emily told her with extreme enthusiasm that this is the day a man will ask to go out with her on a date for the first time. Demian's arrival at the main gate was announced, for the guards to stand in reception of him with serious features. His sudden arrival aroused Saraphi's surprise, who knew in the bottom of her heart that his visit was not for a romantic date, despite the confusion that was drawn on her face. But her maid Emily was insisting with extreme enthusiasm on her own explanation, asserting that his coming alone to see a lady at this time, and with the festival approaching, only means an invitation to a date, and began trying to force Saraphi to change her clothes amid the latter's objections. And suddenly, Emily's face brightened and she announced with overwhelming happiness that Demian had already arrived. While Saraphi was trying to evade from between her hands, Demian entered the room with confident steps but with features shrouded in tension, while the guard opened the door for him to announce his presence officially. Emily whispered to her mistress while pointing to Demian, considering his obvious tension as the categorical evidence of the truth of her expectations regarding the date, while Saraphi asked her to calm down a little. Demian bowed with extreme politeness and began his talk admitting he came to ask a question he was obliged to ask, despite his realization that his sudden coming might seem rude. And while Emily was submerged in her rosy dreams, imagining that the talk was about the festival invitation, Saraphi asked Demian about the matter that occupied his mind. Demian surprised everyone with his unexpected request when he asked Saraphi if she could show him His Highness's memories she saw earlier, dissipating all romantic illusions. Emily's heart broke and the date dreams fell, while Saraphi looked at her with a meaningful gaze, as if reminding her she was right in her doubts from the beginning. Demian explained in a sad and serious tone that the Crown Prince did not share those memories with him, and thus he was forced to come to her to know the truth. Memory returned to a previous scene that brought them together with the Crown Prince, where Raven was talking about the missing puzzle pieces, pointing out that the picture will most likely be completed on the festival day. His words about the festival aroused the surprise of Demian and Saraphi, who were sitting with him, but he confirmed the matter with confidence. Then the Crown Prince ended the meeting coldly, telling them that this is all he needs, and permitting them to depart and return to their homes. At that point, Demian initiated by offering to escort Saraphi to her carriage, but the Crown Prince interrupted him sharply, wondering with disapproval if he possessed all this free time to do that, then directed his harsh speech to Saraphi, rebuking her for not knowing the way despite her working in the place, in a way that aroused her surprise and confusion. Saraphi tried to defend herself and justify her position, but he shouted in her face, refusing to hear any excuses, and ordered her to go to her carriage alone immediately. Saraphi sat stunned by his reaction, while Demian bowed, asking permission in embarrassment, and the Crown Prince turned away, coldly ignoring them. The impact was clear on Demian as he realized that the Crown Prince had intentionally hidden those memories from him, and perhaps was trying to distance him from something. Saraphi remembered that situation while thinking of the reason for her rebuke, to reach a submissive conviction that this is his usual nature and there is nothing new in the matter. And returning to their current session, Demian explained to Saraphi that in the end he couldn't extract any additional information from the Crown Prince after that situation, while Emily was pouring tea in silence. Demian showed his concern, pointing out that the prince's anger at that time and the difficulty of approaching him make him wonder about the nature of the memories Saraphi saw, and whether it is something he shouldn't know. Saraphi smiled bitterly while thinking of the prince's terrible personality, but she reassured Demian out loud that the matter is not as he thinks. She revealed the truth to him, saying that Lady Marette had already confessed to the crown prince, but her confession was that she loves Lord Shahrazad, and not the prince, asserting that this is all there is to it. Demian submerged in thought as he absorbed that Mariette's feelings were directed toward someone else entirely, which changes the course of the investigation. Saraphi commented that this is what makes the matter stranger. If she loves Shahrazad, she had no motive to use the crown prince or seek Rosalyn's help to arrange a meeting with him. The question marks around the case increased. The relationship seemed intertwined and illogical. Marette loves Shahrazad, Rosalyn is the mediator, and mysterious attempts to use a stimulant or poison, and all that left the three in total confusion. Suddenly, Saraphi felt a sharp headache striking her head, and held her forehead in pain before Emily's concerned eyes. A hand extended toward her carrying a medicine pill, so Saraphi thanked the owner of the hand with gratitude. It turned out that Emily was the one who prepared the medicine beforehand, and expressed happily her readiness for such situations, despite her sincere wish that her mistress always stays in good health. While Saraphi took the medicine, Saraphi felt gratitude toward her maid, so she extended her hand to pat Emily's head gently, expressing her great thanks for her help, and admitting that although the sequence of events appeared misplaced, Emily's intervention was a real help to her. And while Emily was looking at her with surprise from this sudden praise, she raised a shocking hypothesis, wondering if Rosalyn had lied and used Lady Marette as a tool to assassinate the crown prince. But soon Saraphi rejected this possibility while analyzing the situation, pointing out that Rosalyn is the one who told her of the meeting appointment so she could go there and stop it, and if her true intention were to assassinate the crown prince, there would have been no reason to give Saraphi that chance to intervene. Demian supported her analysis, asserting that if the goal were assassination, then involving a third party in the plan would only lead to reducing the chances of success. And suddenly, Saraphi's eyes widened in shock as if the puzzle pieces had finally come together in her mind to raise a terrifying question. What if Rosalyn's goal wasn't the crown prince in the first place? Emily gasped in horror as she realized what her mistress was aiming at, while Demian completed the idea in a dark tone, concluding that the true goal was perhaps Lady Marette herself. Saraphi nodded her head in agreement, explaining that this explanation seems very logical. For if Marette had noticed Saraphi's presence hiding at that time, it would have been natural for the crown prince's suspicion to head toward Saraphi immediately upon the incident's occurrence. Saraphi recalled in her memory Mariette's face expressions on that day, and how she appeared stunned and confused, which reinforces the hypothesis that she was a victim of a cleverly plotted scheme. Saraphi linked the threads together, realizing that Rosalyn has feelings for the crown prince, and this strong motive explains her desire to get rid of competitors, and concluded that if Rosalyn wanted to get rid of Marette without staining her hands with blood, she perhaps planned to use Saraphi as a tool to execute her crime. Saraphi clearly realized the brutality of the plan, as Rosalyn succeeded in hitting two birds with one stone, getting rid of Marette and making the crown prince hate Saraphi more than ever, which struck her with daze from that woman's cunning. Emily jumped in panic, insisting on the necessity of informing the crown prince of this truth immediately, warning her mistress that if she didn't do so, she would live her whole life accused, wrongly, of a crime she didn't commit. But Saraphi appeared frustrated as she told her that all this is still just imagination and conclusions at the moment, and even if it were true, proving it requires a confession from Rosalyn, which is something she will never do easily. Demian agreed with her opinion, pointing out that it is likely there is no physical evidence remaining at this stage, and above all, he cannot imagine that Lady Rosalyn would proceed to confess voluntarily. Saraphi asked him curiously about the reason for his certainty of that, and how he can judge she won't confess. Demian answered with gloom while shifting his gaze away, saying it's just a feeling he has. Frustration appeared on Emily's face as she admitted that this possibility is the closest to reality, unfortunately. Saraphi agreed with her opinion while remembering Rosalyn's personality, asserting that this is the impression that woman indeed leaves, which makes the hope in her confession very slim. Emily asked in a tone full of despair whether this truly means there is no way to prove her mistress's innocence. Saraphi sighed as she answered her that most likely there is no way, pointing out the impossibility of forcing someone to tell the truth against their will. But suddenly, Saraphi stopped talking as if lightning had flashed in her mind upon her uttering the phrase, telling the truth. Emily asked her eagerly if she had thought of something, while Demian turned toward Saraphi and asked her seriously if there was a way. Saraphi remembered the only person who possesses the ability to conquer will, and realized there is only one person who can force others to tell the truth, even if it is against their desire. And the image of Crown Prince Raven appeared in her imagination. The scene shifted to night, where the quiet palace corridors appeared under the moonlight, while a mysterious figure was hiding under a cloak and walking cautiously. That figure removed the cover from her head to reveal Rosalyn's face, whose features appeared a mixture of anticipation and caution as she stepped her steps toward her unknown destination. Demian realized the Crown Prince has the dragon's tongue, a power that forces the truth out of anyone. But Saraphi, drowning in despair, was sure he'd never use it for her sake. As darkness fell, Demian decided it was time to head out. While getting into his carriage, he told her to take care of herself and stop overthinking. She felt a sharp pain in her head and sighed, feeling totally helpless. Later that night, she asked her maid Emily for headache meds. Emily said she'd just give her the whole bottle since the pain seemed constant. Lying in bed, Saraphi worried that without the prince's power, there was no way to prove the truth. Feeling trapped, she whispered to herself that Raven would never help her, and she couldn't do this alone. She imagined him ending up with Rosalyn and wondered if they'd finally leave her in peace so she could live a quiet life. But guilt hit her. Was it right to hide that she might be a killer just for her own comfort? She pictured Rosalyn by his side and feared the consequences if she accused her while he already suspected Saraphi. She realized everyone would just hate her and think she's a liar, making things even worse. Her head throbbed again. She stared at the pill bottle, thinking about taking another even though she'd had way too many. She stayed awake all night, eyes wide open. After finally drifting off, Emily came in the next morning. She tried to wake her gently, but Saraphi woke up face to face with Rosalyn, who was standing right by her bed. With a fake innocent smile, Rosalyn asked if she was mad at her. She grabbed Saraphi's hands tightly, saying she shouldn't let anyone take the prince away, and that Saraphi was only avoiding her because she couldn't face the truth. Then she started playing the victim, begging for forgiveness and swearing she wouldn't leave the house until she was forgiven. Saraphi screamed internally at how ridiculous this was. Chaos broke out in the room as Emily tried to handle the situation, while Saraphi was just baffled by Rosalyn's persistence. Later, while walking in the garden, Rosalyn followed her like a shadow. Saraphi thought sarcastically that she didn't expect not leaving the house to mean literally sticking to her back. Rosalyn noticed how pale she was and asked if she was okay. Saraphi's headache got worse just by having her near. When asked if she felt sick, Saraphi admitted her head hurt, then immediately wondered why she was being so honest with her. Rosalyn saw the empty medicine bottle and said it had run out. She excitedly offered to go get her good medicine herself, making Saraphi even more confused. Saraphi refused immediately, thinking there was no way she'd take anything Rosalyn prepared, but she lied and said she was fine and there was a pharmacy nearby. She asked Emily which pharmacy they usually use, and Emily said the Imperial pharmacy. Rosalyn cheered, saying her family uses the same one and suggested they go together. Saraphi tried to back out, telling Emily the palace medicine wasn't working and they should look for something else. Emily reluctantly agreed, but Rosalyn was shocked, claiming that was impossible. She confidently stated their pharmacy was the best in the world. Saraphi admitted that might be an exaggeration. Rosalyn smiled slyly, reminding her that the genius pharmacist her family sponsors works at the palace. She added that he's now the chief officer there. Saraphi was stunned by this realization. She understood that since a relative of Rosalyn's ran the place, it must have rare ingredients. This meant Rosalyn could get anything she wanted, drugs or even poisons. Rosalyn grabbed her arm, saying they were going now, while Saraphi screamed for help inside her head. They reached the Imperial pharmacy. Rosalyn walked in like she owned the place, which annoyed Saraphi. She greeted a master. An old man appeared from behind the doors, complaining about his back. Saraphi was terrified by his looks, imagining him as some villain. Rosalyn welcomed him warmly, saying it had been a long time. He asked who was hiding behind her. Saraphi stepped forward and introduced herself, but he misunderstood and thought she was Rosalyn's fiancé. He commented that she'd brought a marriage candidate and that Saraphi looked like a handsome man despite not looking like a woman. Rosalyn laughed and corrected him, explaining Saraphi is a woman, and the old man remarked on how fast the world changes. Rosalyn loudly asked for headache medicine. He got angry and asked if she thought he was deaf. She apologized, wondering if she had been too loud. He handed her a bottle, but it was stomach medicine. After some back and forth, she finally got the headache pills. But Saraphi held the bottle. She worried if it was even safe to take. Rosalyn assured her the pharmacist was brilliant despite his bad hearing, and the director himself gave it to her. Saraphi wasn't convinced, but told herself it might work this time. She apologized to Rosalyn, who said she was just happy to help. That happiness made Saraphi wonder, was she just overthinking everything? She thought maybe Rosalyn was just naturally curious, and she was the one turning everything into a dark conspiracy just to survive. But she realized if Rosalyn was the guilty one, all suspicion would be off her. She admitted to herself the real problem might be her own suspicious nature. She decided to stop digging. She called out to Rosalyn and told her she forgave her, which made Rosalyn super happy. Saraphi thanked her for caring. Rosalyn reminded her with a smirk that the festival was coming up soon and asked if she planned to stay there all day. Rosalyn remembered she needed to pick a dress, thanked her, and squeezed her hand before leaving. Saraphi felt relieved and thought she really wanted to make more friends from now on. She waved goodbye. Standing alone, she decided to stop investigating and just let things be. Like Raven said, once the puzzle pieces fit, the truth comes out. But a terrifying thought hit her. What if she really was the guilty one? She'd definitely face execution. Panicking, she decided she had to run away as soon as possible. She burst into Demian's office, startling him. She asked if she could ask him something, and he agreed immediately. She asked who to report if someone in the palace administration was too sick to work, but no one noticed. He said reporting to the chief officer was the right move. She smiled and told him the problem was that the person is the chief officer. He seemed to understand. He suggested the fastest way was to talk directly to the crown prince, which annoyed her. She walked down the hall frustrated, wondering why everything led back to him. She reviewed her situation. She's in the Imperial palace, she works for the army, and her boss is him. She realized there's no escaping reality. As long as she hasn't resigned, she can't avoid him. She made up her mind. She had to resign and get out of here fast. Saraphi set her plan. She'd tell the prince about the old official and use the chance to quit. Hurrying along, she thought that if a chef leaves, they'd just hire a new one anyway. But on her way, 2 soldiers stopped her excitedly. They praised her cakes, with one saying he'd never tasted anything so amazing in his life. The other added that eating her delicious food every day made him look forward to work. She had mixed feelings. She tried not to let the praise get to her, but inside she was glowing. She couldn't help it. Tears of joy fell as she thanked them. They waved goodbye, saying they were looking forward to tomorrow's food too. She waved back, still crying from the emotion. To gather her courage, she took a dose of the headache medicine. Finally, standing before the prince's office door, she told herself to just get it over with. She knocked. He let her in, and he was surprised to see her. She told him she had something to report. He asked what it was, and she said it was about the chief pharmacist. She explained he was getting old and his hearing was failing. She added that his duties were becoming a burden and asked if it required an investigation. He asked if she meant the man recommended by Rosalyn's family, and she said yes. After thinking for a moment, he said he'd look into it. She remembered the soldier's words about being excited to work because of her food. Confused, she wondered if she could really quit after hearing that, so she backed down and said there was nothing else. He looked at her, confused by her tears, and asked if she was sure. She said yes. Then he surprised her with an unexpected question. What did she think of Rosalyn? Stunned, she wondered why he'd ask that now. He asked if she had any personal feelings for her, then stated he didn't have any specific feelings himself. Then he leaned in and asked why she thought he'd asked her to be his partner. Confused, she wondered what he was talking about. He reminded her she'd been closest to Rosalyn all this time and asked if she ever thought Rosalyn was weird. He explained there was something strange about her that even an outsider like him could feel, and it was weird she hadn't noticed. She wondered if he suspected Rosalyn. She realized this was her chance. Should she tell him Rosalyn might be the guilty one? But she remembered how nice Rosalyn had been to her. So she told him Rosalyn treats her with great care and sincerity. Trying to act indifferent, she said Rosalyn does have some quirks. She justified it by saying some people just get a bit obsessed with their friendships. He seemed convinced and said he must have been wrong, then dismissed her, which surprised her. She left the office while he stayed behind, thinking deeply. Back in her room, Emily greeted her. She asked if Saraphi was really stopping the investigation into Rosalyn, and she said yes. Emily noticed her hesitation and said she felt her lady had grown to hate her. Saraphi was shocked, thinking Emily must be wrong since they were close friends. She told her maid she'd had some doubts, but it was just a misunderstanding with no proof. She insisted on staying friends with Rosalyn like always, but Emily cut her off firmly, saying they were never good friends, which shocked Saraphi. She added seriously that Lady Rosalyn was the reason for her lady's strange behavior. Saraphi asked in shock what she meant. Emily explained that since getting close to her, she'd changed a lot, and asked if she really didn't remember. Saraphi asked for an explanation. The maid exploded in anger, reminding her how she started wearing those weird dresses and how her makeup was so terrible she couldn't even look at it. Flashes of her past behavior influenced by Rosalyn crossed Saraphi's mind. She tried to justify it by saying friends share tastes, but then remembered from the original novel that her tastes were indeed weird. Emily denied it, stressing that Rosalyn never wore weird dresses or loud makeup herself. Saraphi froze in shock. The maid revealed Rosalyn was the one encouraging her, saying if she were as pretty as Saraphi, she'd wear those dresses, and that the over-the-top makeup looked great on her. But But Rosalyn would tell others that the makeup made Saraphi look ugly whenever she went out. She added that Rosalyn told her she looked ugly without makeup, and that she should never show her bare face to anyone. Emily concluded Rosalyn was brainwashing her, even though she was beautiful without makeup. Saraphi agreed, thinking it was strange, as if the other girl wanted everyone to hate her, which Emily confirmed. A terrifying thought hit Saraphi. Did she intentionally make her look hideous in front of the prince? But she asked Emily if there was really a reason for all this. He already hated her because of her constant stalking. She wondered if there was any reason for Rosalyn to hate her that much. She remembered her childhood with Raven and wondered if Rosalyn was jealous of them being childhood friends. She realized if Rosalyn loved Raven, it would all make sense, but she had no proof. Emily took her hand and said she just hoped things worked out between them, confusing Saraphi with the sudden topic change. Saraphi thought about her goals, survival and peace. She realized if the prince ended up with Rosalyn, she might achieve them. Then they could deal with each other while she lived a quiet life cooking. She felt she'd finally be free from all this relationship stress, but added she hoped she wasn't the guilty one, or she'd never survive. She decided she had to be ready to run at any moment. She remembered the original novel's ending, where Raven lived happily with the Fairy Queen. She wondered what would happen to the story if he ended up with Rosalyn, and what about the Fairy Queen? But she quickly dismissed it, figuring the plot would just change again. In the end, she decided it wasn't her business anymore. That night, a guard gave Emily a letter for her lady. She was surprised by the sealed letter from him addressed to Saraphi. On the morning of the festival, Rosalyn met the prince at the palace entrance. She welcomed him warmly, commenting on the beautiful day. In the carriage, he asked about her relationship with Saraphi, and she said they were as close as ever. She described Saraphi as a precious friend who stood by her in hard times. The prince remarked that they seemed really close. He added he was sure they didn't hide secrets, but Rosalyn looked hesitant. Worried, she asked if something happened and offered to help. He told her it was about Marette. Her face froze in shock and horror. She claimed she knew nothing, but he looked at her confidently, knowing she was lying. He used the dragon's tongue and ordered her to tell the truth about why she introduced Marette. She tried her old story, claiming she was a fan and asked for a meeting, but he knew it was a lie. There was no reason for it. He remembered her explicit confession of love for Lady Scheherazade, and how grateful she was just to exist in the same world as her. The prince sarcastically asked Rosalyn what she meant by being a fan. She answered confusedly, saying she didn't know the details, but maybe she just wanted to date someone handsome, which was a natural thought. He sat back confidently and said he was now sure of it. The carriage moved, finally reaching the festival square filled with people and music. He ordered her to get out, then he gave her a choice. Tell the truth right here and now, or in front of all these people watching, and asked if she'd confess. Terrified, she started trembling and clenched her hands. He grabbed her angrily, demanding an answer. Meanwhile, in another carriage, Saraphi sat with Demian and Emily. Emily wondered about the tense atmosphere, guessing Demian might plan to confess his love today. Saraphi suddenly found herself in a strange, beautiful garden and asked Demian where they were. He apologized for not telling her earlier, explaining the prince ordered him to bring her here. Surprised, she wondered why he was involved in this. The prince was waiting at the meeting spot. She appeared in an elegant white dress, making him freeze, dazzled by her beauty. But he quickly snapped out of it, thinking it wasn't the time to be charmed. Then he called out for someone to come out already. Rosalyn stepped out from behind a tree. Saraphi was shocked to see her and wondered why she was there. Rosalyn ran to her, grabbed her hands crying, and apologized profusely. Saraphi stood there totally lost, while Demian and Emily watched. Rosalyn collapsed, screaming that everything was her fault. A terrifying thought hit Saraphi. Was it about Marette? Rosalyn confirmed it was all her fault, so Saraphi asked if it was true she tried to kill Raven. Trembling, she confessed that what she put in his food wasn't a stimulant, but a love potion. The prince looked at her in disbelief. Rosalyn explained that whoever drinks the love potion falls for the one who drank the seduction potion. She screamed that she didn't know it contained stimulant ingredients. The prince held his head in frustration, asking if she was trying to start a romance with him. Crying, she explained she didn't care about that. Her plan was that if she drank the seduction potion and he forced her into something, Saraphi would be so shocked she'd leave him forever. Saraphi screamed in shock, asking why she'd do that and if she hated her that much. Rosalyn exploded, saying she did it because she thought Raven would take Saraphi away from her. She added that Saraphi is so beautiful and attractive that he would have fallen in love with her eventually. She screamed that she had to stop that. Then she grabbed her tightly, declaring loudly that Saraphi was hers. Demian and Emily were stunned. Saraphi couldn't process it, wondering about this weird turn of events. Rosalyn turned to him and said that despite everything, he wasn't affected at all. She fell to her knees crying, saying that even though he drank the love potion, he felt nothing when he looked at her. Saraphi felt a massive headache. She held her head in shock, amazed that Rosalyn tried to kill someone for such a petty reason. Rosalyn explained she thought her plan failed, and when she went to the bedroom to get the love potion candle she hid, the prince returned earlier than expected, and Saraphi was behind him. Panicking, she thought if he wasn't under the potion's spell and found her in his room, Saraphi would kill her, so she had to run before they searched the room. Thus, Saraphi recalled the scene where she tried to stop the prince who thought she was crazy, while Rosalyn was hiding under the bed. At that time, he noticed something and asked who was there. He found a long strand of hair on the window and realized a woman had been there. He insisted someone definitely broke in. In the present, Rosalyn admitted she was terrified when she realized Saraphi saw her hair, so she searched Saraphi's room later while she was out, but couldn't find the hair. Saraphi remembered Emily saying she saw Rosalyn searching her room. The prince held his head and asked if that was why she brought Marette, because she had the same hair color. Crying, she said that was part of it, and she thought the potion might have just failed with her specifically. So she thought making him fall for another woman was the next best option, but then, she never imagined Saraphi would kill Marette. In her memory, she recalled getting a potion that makes one desperately want the person in front of them. Holding the bottle, she thought it was a bit shameful, but it had to work. She approached the prince, telling him Marette wanted to talk privately. He was surprised, but Rosalyn insisted Marette had something to tell him. Marette wondered if he really wanted to see her. Rosalyn lied, saying he seemed interested in her. Marette thought about him being related to Lady Scheherazade and wondered what he was like. But personally, she didn't care about anyone but Lady Scheherazade. Rosalyn whispered to her, spreading a rumor that the prince had a scandalous history with women. Marette was surprised, wondering if he was a bad person. Rosalyn gave her another potion, saying it'd be hard to reject him directly, so she should pretend to agree and secretly put this in his tea. She explained it was a potion to make the person in front of her look extremely ugly. Once that happened, he'd lose interest and she could leave. Marette agreed and thanked her. Then Rosalyn rushed to tell Saraphi that Marette was planning something and arranged to meet the prince alone. Saraphi was shocked. Rosalyn warned her she might try to give him another stimulant and told her the location so she could check. Saraphi agreed, determined to expose Marette. Rosalyn smiled wickedly as she watched them, thinking this would settle everything. Her real plan was for Saraphi to end up hating the prince, and when that happened, Saraphi would be hers. In the present, Rosalyn cried and said that was how it was supposed to go, but she never imagined that Saraphi would kill Marette. She covered her face, screaming it was all her fault. She added that if she hadn't lied and provoked her, this tragedy would never have happened. Saraphi thought to herself, all I did was swap the cups, and wondered if what she knew was really true. She doubted herself, thinking she hadn't experienced it firsthand, only heard others' stories. In that case, she couldn't fully deny it. She felt Raven's sharp gaze piercing her. Panicking, she thought she had to say something, anything, quickly. In her confusion, she screamed, I want headache medicine. Saraphi mentioned her medicine isn't working. Everyone got confused, and she immediately regretted saying it. But the crown prince moved closer and told her she just gave him a great lead. He grabbed her bottle and told her that her headache pills were completely useless, which shocked her. The prince thought about Rosalyn's mess and realized nothing in her plan worked as intended. He explained that none of the potions she made worked right, and usually they'd blame the source. He said they already know the truth and announced they were heading to the pharmacy right now. The prince dashed off, leaving Saraphi and Demian stunned, wondering if they were really going to the Imperial pharmacy. Emily stood by a trembling Rosalyn and asked what to do with her. Saraphi ordered her to take Rosalyn home. Emily took the girl away as she kept crying and apologizing. Saraphi trusted her maid and rushed to catch up with the prince. She called his name, but he didn't stop, so she grabbed his hand and demanded a full explanation. He told her it was urgent and they had to talk while walking fast. Demian thought they were already basically running. The prince explained to Saraphi that the love potion never had stimulants in it, but the analysis of what Rosalyn got showed stimulants were present. Demian was shocked, and the prince added that Saraphi's medicine was totally ineffective. She wondered if it just didn't work for her specifically. The prince asked if she remembered the head of the pharmacy. He reminded her that Rosalyn's family supports him, and since her family is second only to the royals, her medicine was a special case prepared by him. She asked what that meant. The prince reminded her about the man's hearing loss. She agreed, but wondered if an expert would prescribe poison by mistake. The prince suggested another possibility. It wasn't hearing loss, but dementia. Demian realized the problem wasn't the medicine itself. The prince explained that the medicine didn't fail. She was likely given the wrong thing from the start. Saraphi realized that the potion Rosalyn got, which she also drank, was a mistake too. Demian asked if he figured all this out just by hearing the story. The prince confirmed they needed to check the records fast. Saraphi thought that the pharmacy logs wouldn't lie. The prince added that records are facts. The three rushed through the hall and the prince kicked the pharmacy door open. The pharmacist panicked at his sudden arrival. He asked for the head official. A pharmacist said he was in the back room. The old man came out and asked who the visitors were, not recognizing them at all. Everyone was floored. Saraphi realized in horror that if he didn't recognize the prince, he definitely had dementia. The prince ordered a search of the logs for specific dates. As the staff searched, the old man watched in confusion. They found the record. He prescribed love potion and seduction potion, but actually dispensed stimulants and vitality drainers. Saraphi realized with a shock that this was the day of the bedroom incident. She remembered Rosalyn being sick after that, claiming it was a cold. She asked if she got scolded for sneaking into the prince's room. Rosalyn claimed it was a false rumor, but Saraphi knew someone was there. In the present, the prince remembered Rosalyn stumbling like she had a cold, and his food definitely had stimulants. He recalled his maids warning him about the food, which had shocked him then. They were relieved nothing irreversible happened. One reminded him this happened because he refuses to let anyone taste test his food. So, the love potion was actually a stimulant, and the seduction potion was a vitality drainer. Saraphi realized everything finally made sense. Demian asked the prince why the stimulant didn't affect him. The prince smiled confidently and asked if he forgot he defeated a dragon. He explained most drugs don't work on his body, but Saraphi looked at him, knowing as the reader that this wasn't the real reason. She knew Raven's secret that no one else did. The prince sighed and said he guessed as much. Saraphi panicked, wondering if he knew she knew. The prince showed them another record. The prescription said headache medicine, but the output was vitamins and supplements. She screamed internally. That's why the treatment never worked. Demian realized that's why her pain never improved. The prince ordered real headache medicine this time. Demian was relieved there were no other victims, but Saraphi thought of Marette and remembered her death scene. The prince said sadly that even with the truth, the dead don't return. He stressed that taking an innocent life is a serious crime, and mistakes must be answered for. That was Raven's conclusion. A few days later, Rosalyn vanished. Saraphi sat in the garden, unable to believe she actually ran away. She asked the prince what would happen, and he said they had to find her, and that running only makes the sentence worse. She guessed she just got scared and fled. She worried about how reckless this was and what she planned to do next. She decided that if she left her alone, something irreversible might happen, and she had to bring her back. She realized all she wanted was peace and freedom from this drama. Just then, a letter fell near her. She picked it up and read it. It was addressed to her, saying if she's reading this, she probably hates the writer. The letter said that without this message, she'd disappear without a word. The writer admitted her mistakes, made no excuses, and said she'd been terrified ever since. She described nightmares of being caught, feeling suffocated and unable to think, knowing she should turn herself in. But her body wouldn't move, and she felt Saraphi was the only one she could be honest with. She begged her to come alone for one last meeting to find the courage to return. She pleaded not to be left alone. Saraphi looked at the letter with resolve. She decided she would bring her back. She reached the location, a grand palace, wondering if it was too obvious for a hideout. Rosalyn opened the door happily, surprising Saraphi. She thanked her for coming. Saraphi asked worriedly if she was okay. With a smirk, Rosalyn invited her in, saying she had much to tell. Saraphi advised her that running only makes things worse, and Rosalyn reluctantly agreed. She asked her to return quickly. She agreed to go back, but said she just wanted to see her for a moment. She sat on the edge of the bed, saying they might not see each other much anymore. She asked Saraphi for one last hug. After a brief hesitation, Saraphi hugged her. Rosalyn whispered with a smile, asking if she'd leave her now. She seriously said she wouldn't, and Rosalyn asked if she meant it. She told her she must accept her punishment and not repeat the mistake. Then they could be friends again. Rosalyn touched her face gently and called her a fool while smiling. Suddenly, Saraphi felt something cold around her ankle. She was chained. Rosalyn pushed her onto the bed, and she angrily asked what she was doing. She smiled wickedly and told her not to worry. With a terrifying look, she said now, no one would ever take her away. At the palace, Demian told the prince that Saraphi didn't show up for work. The prince just said he understood and asked why. Demian wondered if it involved Rosalyn. The prince doubted it, but then Emily burst into the office. She apologized and explained she had something important to show him. She gave him the letter Rosalyn sent to Saraphi. She told him her lady vanished, leaving only this. The prince crushed the letter in his hand in a rage. He stood up and told Demian to take over his duties. He told him he'd be busy with some outside work. Meanwhile, Rosalyn told the chained Saraphi she must be tired and hungry and went to get food. She told her to stay put and promised to be back in moments, then locked the door tight. Saraphi thought this was her chance. She saw a metal clip and started trying to pick the lock. She struggled to reach it. She kept trying desperately until she grabbed it. Finally, she unlocked the chain and freed herself. She looked around the empty room and headed for the window. She planned to use the tree to break her fall. Then she'd sneak through the bushes to the main gate. She worried if she could really do it, but she resolved to try and climbed onto the windowsill. She figured she wouldn't die if she hit the tree. She jumped, screaming, "Now or never," and fell into the branches. She hit the ground hard and was in pain. Grabbing her injured leg, she started crawling with difficulty. She knew she just had to get past that gate. There was a village nearby where she could find help. She heard a rustle in the bushes, but told herself it was just her imagination. Since it was quiet, she guessed Rosalyn hadn't noticed yet. She tried to hurry, but suddenly stopped when she saw a pair of boots. Rosalyn stood there with a dark aura. Saraphi screamed her name in terror. She looked at her coldly, saying she was disappointed. She confronted her angrily, asking how she could try to leave her when she was the only one supposed to stay. Saraphi tried to calm her, saying she only came to help. She begged her to go back to the palace together. Rosalyn grabbed her face hard and told her to shut up. She told her she was the only one in the world who ignored her stupidity while she chased a fool like Raven. She asked how she could think of leaving. She grabbed her head and asked if she agreed. She pulled out a small bottle and said this was her punishment. She forced her to inhale it and told her to sleep. As Saraphi lost consciousness, she smelled something strange while Rosalyn smiled evilly. She stood over her, telling her to be a good girl and not move because it's dangerous. Her consciousness faded as she whispered for help. Suddenly, the prince appeared. Rosalyn was shocked, wondering how he got there. Saraphi saw his blurry form and whispered his name. Rosalyn screamed at him to stay back. She grabbed Saraphi and threatened that if he took a step, he'd watch her die. The prince's eyes glowed with rage and a dark energy rose around him. Rosalyn was terrified, wondering what it was. He calmly told her to let her go. Then he released his full power, screaming at her to release her immediately. Rosalyn dropped Saraphi in terror as she passed out. The prince caught her before she fell and called her name worriedly. He held her, begging her to hold on. She opened her eyes slowly, whispered his name, and he asked if she was awake. But she suddenly pushed him away, screaming for him to stay away, which surprised him. At that moment, Rosalyn grabbed his sword from the floor, but she changed her mind and moved away from it. Saraphi looked at her and thought Rosalyn was done for. Then he spoke to her, ordering her to listen carefully, explaining she didn't just insult the royals and nobles, but she gave false testimony again, kidnapped a guard, and forced drugs on them. He confirmed she attacked the royal family itself. He told her this wouldn't be settled easily, then carried Saraphi away. The soldiers arrived then, calling out worriedly. At the palace, the doctor told the prince Saraphi was stable with only traces of the drug left, so he dismissed him. Saraphi woke in her bed and called for him. He approached as she fully woke up and asked where she was. He reassured her she was in the palace and safe now. Saraphi remembered what Rosalyn did. She woke up gasping in panic, and he asked if she was okay. He touched her gently, saying it's normal to be shocked after that. He added there was no need to fear, but she cut him off, saying she should have done it then, which confused him. Saraphi was fuming, screaming that she should have knocked that woman out when she had the chance, calling herself a fool for believing her. She angrily wondered what happened to Rosalyn and if it was too late to go teach her a lesson. The crown prince told her she'd been arrested and her trial was coming up soon. He explained that on top of her past crimes, they added charges for escaping, kidnapping, and forced drugging. Then he turned to her and asked how she was feeling, apologizing for what happened. But she just gave a faint smile and told him he did nothing wrong. It was her fault for going there alone. He cut her off firmly, insisting it was his fault for letting her fall into danger. He explained that since she's in the service of the Imperial family, it's his job as her boss to protect her. He admitted what happened was his total failure because he misjudged her. She looked at him in total shock, unable to process what she was hearing. She wondered to herself if he knew about her, and just how much he really knew. Anxiety kicked in as she wondered how long he'd known and what she was even supposed to say. He told her the recent incident confirmed his suspicions. He told her she hadn't killed anyone, and it was obvious she wasn't the Saraphi he used to know, which led him to conclude that she'd gone through a total personality change. He continued his analysis, saying it seemed the explosion snapped her twisted mind back to its senses, and she'd definitely changed. He admitted things like this are rare, but they do happen, and apologized for doubting her and thinking her behavior was just an act. A few days later, Rosalyn was walking down the prison hallway in handcuffs. In the courtroom, the judge stood up to announce the verdict. He stated the defendant was accused of fraud and using lies and social status to manipulate multiple people, plus spiking others' food with substances designed to dangerously weaken their minds and judgment. Without properly checking the ingredients or the potential danger of those materials, she intentionally set up a situation aimed at causing conflict between multiple parties. As a direct result of these actions and the resulting chaos, a serious tragedy occurred, leading to one death. Additionally, right after her crimes were discovered, she fled, refusing to comply with the investigation or court summons. Then she lured the victim, Saraphi, to a secluded villa with a fake letter, where she committed more crimes, including physical restraint, illegal imprisonment, and intimidation, marking a second string of criminal acts. However, since it can't be proven the defendant realized the substance was a deadly poison, or could have reasonably predicted a fatal outcome, the court finds this case doesn't constitute murder. Instead, her actions will be classified as involuntary manslaughter, along with charges of inciting the use of dangerous substances, fraud, kidnapping, and illegal imprisonment. The court also views her behavior as coercion and intimidation. Until the final sentencing, and due to the risk of escape and destruction of evidence, she is sentenced to house arrest. Saraphi sighed with relief. Rosalyn was being led away and looked at her. She whispered an apology while Saraphi sat there confused. She wondered if she'd just apologized to her. Demian approached and praised her for what she did today, explaining that even though the murder charge didn't stick, manslaughter is still a very serious felony. He added that since all other charges were proven, this isn't a bad result at all. She smiled, thinking that no matter the verdict, Lady Marette isn't coming back, but at least it's finally over. The Crown Prince came up and told her it wasn't her fault. She was surprised by his words and called him by his title. He explained that the blame lies with the deceiver, not the one misled, and no one should be held responsible for being tricked. So she thanked him, but he warned her it was too early to let her guard down, which confused her. He asked when she last heard from Duke Bernaeus. She wondered in confusion if he meant her father, and told him she didn't really remember. She recalled her maid Emily saying her father was on an overseas mission for the Emperor regarding an export deal, and that she was supposed to be suffering from amnesia. She asked why he was asking. He explained the only person capable of controlling Rosalyn's family is her father, Duke Bernaeus. He added that with him gone, Rosalyn's family no longer felt the need to mind their manners and would definitely use every means to reduce her sentence. The prince suggested it's best for her to send him a letter. She wondered how she could do that when she'd never met him. She asked her maid when he was due back. Emily told her there was no set date, but based on his luggage, it would likely be a few more months at least. She asked her to send him a letter, and she agreed immediately. She started writing the letter, wondering what on earth to say to a father she'd never met. She felt anxious thinking about it. A few days later, her maid brought her a letter. She was surprised it arrived so fast. She rushed to the prince's office holding it. She happily told him she got a reply from her father. Then she gave him the letter to read. Its content was blunt, stating he'd already received the report on the incident and there was no need for her to interfere anymore. Her face froze in shock. Demian commented that this means the Duke is already aware, and if he's in control, the Balkarian family won't be able to move recklessly. She gave a nervous smile and said in that case, there shouldn't be any problem. He felt relieved and told her it was safe to put her mind at ease now. She asked the prince if he felt the same way. He said yes, confirming this was at least the most likely outcome. She felt reassured and thanked God. After a while, in a public square, an official announced an imperial decree regarding the defendant Rosalyn Balkarian, and given her family's contributions to national industrial stability and diplomacy, His Majesty the Emperor has granted her a special pardon. Saraphi was completely shocked. Demian wondered in disbelief what on earth that was supposed to mean. The crowd couldn't believe what they were hearing. Saraphi said this couldn't be happening, as every charge had been proven during the trial. She asked the prince how this was possible. She ran after him screaming that this was totally ridiculous and her father already knew about the incident. Demian commented that granting a special pardon so fast after all her crimes were proven in court defies proper procedure. The prince agreed that this was indeed suspicious. She wondered in confusion, and he told her the Balkarian family must have offered something to His Majesty. He added that Duke Bernaeus already knew about it. This meant His Majesty had made his decision and was fully prepared for the consequences that would follow his return. Demian realized this meant the king got a price worth the risk. The prince confirmed he intended to see for himself what that price was, feeling curious about what conditions could justify breaking trust with the Duke. She asked if he planned to meet the king now. He said that's exactly what he meant, and since the king caused such a stir, he expected a convincing explanation. She asked worriedly if he was sure, and if he was doing this for her. He looked at her sharply and told her not to misunderstand. This had nothing to do with her. He explained that just because he's the emperor doesn't mean he can do whatever he wants. Even he is bound by rules and laws that must be maintained. The crown prince continued in a firm tone, explaining that if His Majesty was driven by personal greed and making decisions that unfairly hurt the dignity and status of the imperial family, then as the crown prince and a member of that family, he must stop him. The prince headed toward the emperor's office, who greeted him with a smile, asking why he'd come. The prince addressed the emperor by his official title, asking him to explain why he granted a special pardon to the Balkarian family. The emperor smiled mockingly and said he talked as if he already suspected something. The prince told him Duke Bernaeus was already aware and asked if he thought the Duke would accept such a decision. The emperor confidently replied that of course he would, because the Duke agreed to it himself. The prince was in total shock. The emperor explained the Balkarian family made a very clever offer, one beneficial to both the emperor and Duke Bernaeus. The offer included expanding authority over national export industries and exclusive negotiating rights with foreign powers. In short, controlling the empire's financial flow. He told the prince this position controls the empire's future wealth, and Duke Breneus was using the Balkarian family as a stepping stone for more influence. The emperor commented with a sly smile that the duke was very smart because he knew when to step back and wait for the next chance. The prince asked angrily if the emperor was saying Duke Breneus accepted this offer, even knowing his daughter was kidnapped and nearly killed. The emperor coldly replied, "That's how the world works. And when forced to choose, one prioritizes their family over individual family members." The prince wondered why. Outside, Demian and Saraphi were waiting. The prince walked out of the emperor's office feeling furious, repeating to himself, "What an infuriating world." He resolved that if this is how things were going, he'd turn everything upside down. Saraphi asked him worriedly what the emperor said. The prince told her Duke Breneus knew about it too. Saraphi was shocked, and Demian asked if he was saying her father agreed to the pardon as well. The prince confirmed angrily that he didn't just agree, he was part of the deal. The Balkarian family offered terms that benefited both the emperor and her father accepted. Demian couldn't believe it, wondering how this could happen after everything his daughter went through, guessing the duke thought this was an acceptable price for power. The prince thought about how he'd seen enough corrupt nobles making dirty deals behind the scenes, but to put their own child on the line. Saraphi closed her eyes and said she understood. The prince was surprised by her calm, wondering if she wasn't shocked. She told him she'd forgotten, but actually expected this somewhat. Recalling the original story described her father as a man blinded by power who doesn't care about the means as long as he succeeds. She said she understood and already knew what kind of person her father was. The prince asked how she could be so calm. She told him he also knows her father is just another noble found anywhere. And of course she's disappointed, but not surprised. She decided she wouldn't expect anything from him anymore, and couldn't change his mind right now anyway. She smiled, saying people don't change that easily. Demian and the prince looked at her in confusion, and Demian commented that she's very mature. Saraphi said she'd just focus on what she can do, and if nobles treat commoners unfairly, at least she can help stop it. She expressed hope that as long as at least a few people do the right thing, maybe the world will change one day. The prince looked at her thinking that maybe things were always going to end up like this. Saraphi sat in her room, replaying the events. She thought about how the prince was always running for her. He'd saved her when she was kidnapped too. She decided she needed to thank him properly. The next morning, she called her maid Emily and asked if they really had to start preparing this early, adding that while they're at it, they could make some sweets for everyone too. Emily sighed and reluctantly agreed. Saraphi started making a beautiful cake decorated with fruit. Emily praised her, saying it looked really pretty. Meanwhile, the prince was walking down a hallway. Saraphi saw him standing alone and approached him carrying the cake. She told him she was looking for him and thought he'd be alone. He coldly asked what she wanted. She offered him the cake, saying he'd done so much for her, saving her and even going to see the king. She told him she wanted to thank him, so she made this for him. The prince looked at her for a moment, then took the cake and thanked her. She excitedly asked him to have some. The prince took a bite and commented it was good. She asked for a moment and pulled a handkerchief from her pocket. She wiped some cream off his mouth, which surprised him. The prince leaned in to kiss her. Then he suddenly woke up. He wondered what kind of dream he'd just had. He grabbed his blushing face, thinking something was wrong with him. Later in his office, he was replaying the dream. He tried to focus on his work, but the image of Saraphi smiling kept appearing in his mind, making him admit this was annoying. He decided he should go out for some fresh air. He thought it was unusual to be affected by just a silly dream like that. As he walked, he saw Saraphi standing in the hall holding a plate of cakes. He was totally shocked, wondering why this was happening now. Saraphi smiled, welcoming His Highness and saying his timing was perfect. She explained she wanted to do something to thank him for everything he'd done so far. He kept staring at her in shock, remembering his dream. She continued, saying she tried to bake a cake. Suddenly, he backed away when she tried to get close. She wondered in confusion if something was wrong. The prince grabbed his face, wondering why he was acting like this. He apologized, saying he had urgent work and had to leave now. She tried to stop him, but he hurried away. She stood there wondering what just happened. She wondered if her thank you gift was too simple. She walked down the hall, wondering about his sudden behavior. She thought that thanks to his help, she was cleared of murder, and she thought his disgust toward her had faded a bit. She wondered if it was just wishful thinking. She looked at the cake, thinking about how hard she'd worked on it. She also wanted to ask if he'd continue teaching her magic. She concluded that if he was avoiding her this much, the answer was no. Later, she was sitting with Demian in the garden, and he asked what happened this time. She told him she thought the prince was avoiding her. Demian asked if that wasn't normal. She replied she thought she'd managed to get a bit closer to him. She reminded him that before the Rosalyn investigation, he said he'd teach her magic. She told him she tried to give him a cake today to thank him, but he suddenly ran away, and it was bothering her. She added the court already decided she wasn't a killer, and she wasn't chasing him anymore either. Saraphi admitted to Demian that it feels weird coming from her as the person involved. She went through all the reasons why the prince might hate her, from her constant pestering to her tacky behavior and being an ignorant troublemaker, concluding it was hopeless and he still had bad feelings toward her. But Demian cut her off, insisting that wasn't true, and he didn't believe His Highness hated her at all, adding that he truly believed that. Saraphi's face lit up with happiness, saying she was glad to hear that, and figured maybe he was just busy that day. Excitedly, she clenched her fists and resolved to talk to him properly again. Demian looked at her nervously and mumbled he wasn't so sure about that, which confused her. Demian seriously asked if she really had to put in all this effort to get close to the prince. Saraphi was surprised by his question, wondering what he meant. A weird silence fell between them in the garden, and Saraphi wondered about the tense atmosphere. She asked him hesitantly if he thought she shouldn't get close to His Highness. Demian looked away in silence, so Saraphi pressed him on why. She tried to guess the reason, asking if he was afraid she'd be in danger or if he had a bad feeling about it. She pointed out he'd been acting weird lately, as if sensing something, but he just said he had a feeling. Saraphi thought in shock that it was like he could see through everything in this world, but Demian denied it immediately, explaining that's not what he meant. He told her this was just his personal opinion and she shouldn't take it as absolute fact. Saraphi's confusion grew, wondering exactly what Demian was trying to say. Demian cleared his throat and explained regarding the intuition she was worried about. He assured her the prince was no longer a danger to her. He added that on the contrary, it would be fair to say he has positive feelings for her. Saraphi's eyes went wide in shock, and she repeated his words in disbelief, asking if the prince really has positive feelings for her. She looked on with sparkling eyes, laughing lightly with happiness. Saraphi caught herself and asked him to wait a second, trying to process what he just said. She reminded him he'd said earlier there was no need for her to get close to His Highness. She asked with a smile if that meant he was worried about her. She bowed to him with great joy and thanked him sincerely. Demian smiled gently, telling her there was no need to thank him and he was happy he could help. Saraphi got excited again, saying in that case she had to hurry and talk to the prince. She announced with a bright smile she'd go thank him properly this time. He wished her luck, hoping she could express her feelings well. Saraphi bid him a warm goodbye and thanked him again before heading off. Demian watched her walk away, whispering sadly to himself that the person in real danger might be himself. At the training ground, the sound of swords was ringing out loudly. The prince, Raven, was training with unusual intensity and ferocity, swinging his sword like a hurricane. He thought he'd calm down a bit. In the middle of his dash, he imagined Saraphi's face smiling and calling his name, which made him freeze for a second. He grit his teeth in anger, telling himself to focus and push those thoughts out. But her image came back to haunt him, increasing his distraction and making him angry at himself for not being able to focus. With one angry strike, he shattered the training dummy, terrifying the soldiers who wondered what was wrong with him today. As if the training ground had turned into a real battlefield, Raven continued his fierce attack left and right, smashing everything in his path. The dummies fell shattered around him while he stood there panting heavily after burning off his energy. He looked at the destroyed training ground and thought he'd completely trashed the place. Meanwhile, Saraphi was walking through the palace halls, thinking he might be at the training ground. She told herself if he ran from her again, she'd have to ask him when he wasn't busy. Suddenly, she stopped when she heard a familiar voice calling her name. She turned around to find Rosalyn standing there and gasped her name in shock.